Imagine going about your daily life, unaware that someone is watching, following, stalking you, someone with sinister intentions. They hide in the shadows, completely unseen. You have no idea how much danger you're in until it's too late. That's exactly what happened to one teenager from Kansas. This is her story. Jody Leanne Sanderholm was born on September 26, 1987, in Arkansas City, Kansas, in Cowley County. Arkansas City, Kansas has a population of around 12,000 people as of now. It has been home to 3 generations of the Sanderholm family. This city is approximately 1 hour from Wichita, Kansas, and near the border of Oklahoma. Arkansas City truly is a small town, and it's all about that friendly, close-knit community feel. Many residents own their homes and remain in Arkansas City their entire lives, which contributes to a sense of stability and long-term connections among the residents. It definitely has its own little city vibe, but surrounding it, you'll find a lot of green, open spaces, as well as rivers to the west and south. The Sanderholm family consisted of Jody's parents, Brian and Cynthia, who went by Cindy. She also had an older sister, Jennifer, who was 4 years older than her, and an older brother, Jason, who was the oldest at 6 years older than Jody and a couple of years older than Jennifer. But all 3 siblings were not that far apart in age, so they were all close growing up. Jody's parents actually owned a company called Ark City Glass Company, a local establishment in town that's still around today. They install and replace any kind of glass for your home, business, or vehicle. Faith also played a significant role in the Sanderholm family's lives. They were members of the First United Methodist Church, and growing up, Jody's upbringing was rich in faith, being close to her family and embracing community values. Cindy Sanderholm described her daughter Jody as a dream child. According to her, Jody was an extraordinary child who rarely cried as an infant. As she grew up, Jody continued to exhibit exceptional behavior. She was incredibly organized and meticulous, which was evident in every aspect of her life, especially when you looked at her bedroom. Her room was always kept very neat, with everything in its place. Unlike her peers, Jody avoided discipline and never faced any punishment because she would go out of her way to make sure she wasn't breaking any rules. In fact, Cindy and Jody were more like best friends than mother and daughter. They shared a deep connection and told each other everything. Their constant communication made them inseparable, and the respect Jody had for her parents was obvious in her good behavior. Jody was known for her reliability and dependability. She always followed through on her commitments, and she was level-headed, able to make rational decisions even under pressure. Her friends trusted her implicitly and would turn to her whenever they needed anything because of how responsible she was. Jody's mother was a dancer, and like her mother, Jody possessed a deep love for the art. As Jody got older, she had the opportunity to attend Ark City Dance School. Her instructor there was her mother's former dance partner, Terry Schroeder. Jody's talent was undeniable. It was like she was born to dance, and she truly captivated the audience. Her graceful movements and impeccable balance made her seem like an angel gliding across the stage. Dance was more than a hobby for Jody, it was her life. She danced 7 days a week. Jody's passion for dance was evident in every movement she made and radiated from every part of her being. It was where Jody found her identity. She was a dancer. Those who witnessed Jody's talent couldn't help but be drawn to her. She was mesmerizing to watch. Jody met her best friend, Lori Leglider, when they were in 6th grade. They went on to attend Arkansas City School for high school and became inseparable. As freshmen, Jody and Lori auditioned for the high school dance team, the Purple Paws, and they were both selected. The team would perform at the school's football games that year. Only 4 freshman girls made the team, and Jody and Lori were 2 of them. The girls on the team formed a sisterhood, supporting and caring for one another. However, like any siblings, they sometimes fought like sisters too. Despite their disagreements, they all deeply loved one another and formed a very close bond. Jody was named captain of the Purple Paws during both her junior and senior years. This honor was bestowed upon her because she was the most responsible and down-to-earth among her teammates. She possessed qualities that made her an excellent leader, such as her ability to listen to others and remain calm in challenging situations. When Jody reached her teenage years, She began teaching dance twice a week at Arc City Dance, the same dance school she attended as a young girl. In addition to her position at Arc City Dance, she also taught at the Universal Dance Association, where she was both a dancer and an instructor. Jody often had the opportunity to travel around the state for competitions. However, her father, Brian, always worried about Jody. Brian always felt better when Jody was close to home. She was a small-town girl, and he just wanted her to stay close by. Jody graduated from Arkansas City School in 2006 with numerous accolades and honors. One of the recognitions she received was being named Best Dressed in her senior class. In addition to her fashion sense, Jody was an exceptional student academically. She was a member of the National Honor Society and was recognized by a number of esteemed organizations. Jody was named a Kansas Board of Regents Scholar, a prestigious honor granted to students with outstanding achievements. She was also named a Kansas State Scholar, highlighting her exceptional academic performance. If that wasn't impressive enough, Jody was also recognized as one of the most outstanding physics students of the year. Topping off an already impressive list of her awards, Jody found herself among only one of 4 Victorians of her graduating class. The decision was easy when it came time for Jody to go to college. Of course, she was going to go, and with a full dance scholarship. Jody had the opportunity to attend CI College, which was just a short drive from her house. At CI College, Jody was a dance team member of the Tigerettes, and Jody's best friend Lori also received a scholarship and decided to attend CI College along with Jody. They were both members of the Tigerettes dance team. Their days were filled with dancing on the sidelines and halftime shows during the football games, and they also had the opportunity to perform at various events around the community, providing entertainment whenever it was needed. Jody embraced her role as a Tigerette wholeheartedly. She was living her dream. But of course, she had a lot more she wanted to achieve. While attending CI College, Jody was pursuing her studies in pre-pharmacy, her ultimate goal being to move to Dallas, Texas, where her boyfriend, Colby Williams, resided. Now, Colby was a student at the University of Texas, and when Jody shared her plans with her best friend, Lori couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. She was really sad to see Jody leave, but she was also genuinely happy for her and wanted to see her reach all of her goals. That's really hard because they had been by each other's side since they were so little. But Jody and Colby had also been an item since middle school, and everyone thought they were an adorable couple and in love. Throughout high school, they went on countless dates and attended every homecoming dance and even prom together. As time passed, the relationship became more serious, and they started discussing getting married. Jody didn't know this, but Colby was planning to propose to her on their 5th anniversary in May of 2007. So let me take you to just before 2007 began. The Sanderholm family gathered joyfully in December of 2006 to celebrate the holiday season together. Jody's brother, Jason, who had returned from college in Wichita, joined in the festivities, along with Jody's sister, Jennifer, who came with her husband from Kansas City. None of them would have any reason to know at that time that this would be their last Christmas with Jody as part of their family. The new year came, and on January 5th, 2007, Jody and her dance team, the Tigerettes, began their routine dance practices at the W.S. Scott Auditorium in CI College as usual. The session started around 10 a.m., and after dance practice ended about an hour later, Jody and Lori decided to stay behind and practice a new dance move on their own. They wanted to prepare for the halftime show, which was going to be the following day. Jody had choreographed a dance for the event and wanted to perfect her skills with Lori before the big performance. As their private session came to an end, Jody and Lori decided to visit one of their high school friends, Morgan, to help her prepare for a different day dance competition later that night. So Jody informed Lori that she was going to drive home, shower, and then head over to Morgan's house. Now, Jody's mode of transportation was a black 2003 Dodge Stratus. She loved her car. It was one of her prized possessions, and she even had a personalized license plate. She was super particular about anyone driving her car because of her personal attachment to it. But back to Jody. Before she left the college, she got a call from her mom, Cindy. She asked if Jody wanted to go get lunch with her, but Jody actually declined. She explained that she had other commitments. She told her mom she was going to stop by the Subway sandwich restaurant, get a sub, before heading home to take a quick shower, and then meet up with Lori. Sometime after that, she planned to drive to her sister Jennifer's house, but she told her mom that she would be home for dinner. After hanging up with her mom, Jody and Lori said goodbye to one another in the parking lot as they were walking out of the auditorium. As they crossed through the parking lot to their vehicles, they exchanged a friendly, "I love you," before parting ways. When Lori got into her car, she did notice that Jody was just sitting behind the wheel and not backing out. So Lori, being the good friend she is, wondered if everything was okay. She pulled her vehicle right beside Jody's Dodge and kind of gave her a look saying, "Is everything all right?" Jody smiled and waved at Lori, seemingly indicating that everything was just fine. So Lori waved back and then left the parking lot. Jody followed a very particular and predictable routine. She would do the exact same thing every time she got near her house. She would drive right up to the road her family lived on, 14th Street. But before she made that turn down that dead-end road, a road that only had a few homes on one side and thick brush on the other, she would pull up to a row of mailboxes on the street. She would stop here and get all of her family's mail. After that, Jody would turn down the gravel road they lived on, pull into their driveway to park her car, and then, once inside, she would toss all the mail on the counter. That's how everyone would find it every day. Then she would shower and eat lunch. It was like clockwork. That afternoon, Jody's mom was at the family business, which was only a 5-minute drive from their home. She called Jody a little later to check in with her, but she didn't get an answer. Thinking Jody might be in the shower, she decided to wait and call back a few minutes later, but she still did not get a response. At this point, she was worried, so Cindy called her other daughter Jennifer in Kansas City and asked if Jody had gotten there or gotten in touch with her, to which Jennifer said no, she had not. So Cindy told her to call Jody and see if she could get in touch with her. Since Jennifer was pregnant and actually 2 days overdue to have her baby girl, Cindy believed that if Jody was going to answer the phone for anyone, it would be Jennifer. Jody was eagerly looking forward to becoming an aunt, and Cindy thought that Jennifer's condition would prompt Jody to answer her call. However, when Jody still didn't answer, Cindy got really concerned. She worried that something was wrong. Jody's silence was uncharacteristic, and Cindy's worries intensified. Some may be surprised by how quickly parents worry about their children, but this is not uncommon, especially when their child has a predictable routine and always answers their phone. Cindy called her husband, Brian, and told him that Jody wasn't answering her calls. Brian did his best to reassure her that their daughter was okay, but Cindy had a bad feeling that something was wrong. So Cindy decided to leave work early. She headed home, and as she pulled up to the house, her heart sank. Jody's black Dodge Stratus was not parked in its usual spot in the driveway. It had been a little while since Jody had spoken to her mom, so she thought maybe Jody had come home, taken that quick shower, and already left to meet Lori at Morgan's. Well, upon entering the house, Cindy would get her answer. She noticed more signs that Jody had actually never made it home. First of all, there was no mail inside the mailbox when Cindy checked it before pulling into the driveway, but it wasn't on the counter either, where Jody always tossed it. Secondly, Cindy checked the shower. It was completely dry. No damp towels were left around either. So Cindy thought this meant that there was no way Jody could have come home, because the entire reason she planned to make the stop before going to Morgan's was to shower, and she clearly hadn't. In an effort to locate Jody, Cindy called Jody's best friend, Lori. By then, Lori had actually already arrived at their friend Morgan's house to do her hair for the dance competition. Lori had been waiting for Jody to show up, but she never did. So it was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon when Lori got that call from Cindy asking to speak to Jody. Lori explained that Jody wasn't with her and that Jody never showed up for their meeting like she knew she would. Like Cindy, Lori had a really bad feeling about Jody going silent, so she decided to drive to the mall and go to Sears. A lot of their mutual friends worked there, and she wanted to know if Jody had stopped by to chat or if they had heard or seen her. However, no one had. Cindy was still hoping that someone knew where Jody was, so she tried calling her former dance partner, who was Jody's dance instructor at Arc City Dance, Terry Schroeder. Cindy hoped that Terry had seen Jody or that Jody had stopped by the dance studio. However, during their conversation, Terry informed Cindy that she hadn't had any recent contact with Jody. Since Terry knew Jody quite well and knew that she always kept to a strict schedule, she also began to worry. Jody's sudden disappearance was uncharacteristic, as I had mentioned, and she usually informed others about her whereabouts and her plans. Soon, it was already after 5 p.m. The sun was starting to set, the sky was gradually turning darker and the weather colder. A sense of unease began to settle among all the people who loved Jody. The knowledge that she still had not gotten in touch or shown up anywhere brought fear and concern to everyone around her. At 6 o'clock that evening, Jody's father, Brian, arrived home. Brian and Cindy were consumed by worry for their now missing daughter. They knew that every moment that passed meant Jody could be in more danger. With heavy hearts, Brian and Cindy made the decision to gather their strength and contact the authorities. It was time to report Jody as missing and seek help in finding her. The thing is, sometimes when parents report their older teenage children missing, and Jody was 19 at the time, the police may not take them seriously. They might assume the teenager just ran away on their own. However, when the Arkansas City Police Department Chief, Sean Wallace, answered and heard that Jody was missing, he knew there was cause for concern. One of Sean's 4 sons had graduated high school with Jody, and Sean knew the Sanderholm family very well from their business in town. He quickly called for an officer, Lieutenant Mark Masson, to be dispatched to the Sanderholm residence to meet him there, so they could both speak with Jody's worried parents. Upon their arrival, they did a preliminary check around the home and jotted down notes about Jody from Cindy and Brian. They looked in Jody's room, where all of her belongings were neat, nice, and in order. Nothing appeared to be out of place. While looking around the home, Cindy explained that the shower and Jody's loofah were dry, even though she had said she was going to take a shower as soon as she got home. With no sign of Jody or her car anywhere, Wallace and Masson began to suspect that Jody may have gotten into a car accident. Perhaps she was in a ditch somewhere. That was another possibility they considered. Maybe she had run out of gas, but she had a cell phone, so she would have called them. Even though it could have died, something could have happened, but it seemed unlikely. Finding Jody as soon as possible was crucial, so the chief immediately released information about her missing person case over the local radio. By doing so, he hoped to have as many eyes as possible searching for Jody and her vehicle. A full-scale search began that night in response to the officer's alert. The Arkansas Police Department and surrounding agencies embarked on a very extensive search effort. From that moment forward, officers drove down every street, checked every alley, and meticulously looked in ditches, hoping to find Jody or her car. However, despite their best efforts, the search team was unable to locate Jody or her black Dodge Stratus. The Sanderholm family sat around all night, wide awake and worried about Jody's whereabouts. Cindy desperately hoped that everything would be okay, but deep down, she had a really bad feeling. Hours went by, and still, there was no sign of their teenage daughter. At around 2:30 a.m., Jody's father decided to take matters into his own hands. He was frustrated by the lack of evidence and progress, even though the police were doing their best. He decided to take action. Brian picked up the phone and called the local TV stations in Wichita, one by one. With each call, Brian explained the situation and requested their assistance in finding his daughter. He emphasized the importance of getting the news out to the public as soon as possible, hoping that someone might have seen or heard something that could lead them to Jody. Jody's sister, Jennifer, was stuck in Kansas City, still waiting to give birth any minute. She had been informed of her sister's disappearance, and because she couldn't leave, she sent some of her friends to Arkansas City to gather information for her. She asked them if they had seen Jody. One of Jennifer's friends claimed she did see a car that matched Jody's, and it was driving east, kind of out of town, but there was little else Jennifer could gather about her sister's whereabouts. She was still holding on to hope that Jody was okay. Even if Jody had been injured in a car accident and was unconscious, at least she would still be alive. But there were things I'm sure her family worried about. Jody was beautiful, fit, and lively, drawing a lot of male attention, even if it was unwanted. Unfortunately, these factors naturally made her a target, like other women. But you never think anything would happen to your own sister, family, or friend. A friend of Jody's named Carrie Morris contacted the police after she realized Jody was missing. She reported seeing Jody in her car driving along US 166 just outside of Arkansas City. This matched what the other person had said too. According to Carrie, she waved to Jody, but Jody never waved back, which she thought was odd. Carrie also mentioned that she believed there was a man in the car with Jody. Initially, she thought it was Jody's boyfriend, Colby. However, she noticed that the man seemed bigger than Colby, so she began wondering who it could have been. Carrie said that after passing Jody, she called her phone but received no response, which was unusual considering they had done this on previous occasions, passing each other and then talking on the phone. At the very least, Jody would have said something, but Jody didn't even wave back. The detectives investigating Jody's disappearance were faced with the possibility that she had driven to Dallas to visit her boyfriend, Colby, which could account for her sudden disappearance. However, when a search was conducted in Jody's room, it was discovered that all of her clothes were in place. There was no evidence that she had packed a suitcase or anything for the trip. One of the detectives sought the opinion of Jody's mother regarding her daughter's relationship with Colby. They wanted to know if Colby had any issues with Jody, perhaps jealous tendencies, or if they were having problems in their relationship. Jody's family explained that Colby was away at college, and they'd known him since middle school. He and Jody's relationship was just fine. However, not everything is always what it appears to be on the outside. We know that all too well. So the Arkansas City Police decided to contact Colby by phone in Dallas, and he informed the officers that Jody was not with him, but he was very worried about her going missing. The officers arranged for Colby to drive from Dallas to Arkansas City, where they planned to conduct a formal interview. The detectives believed that speaking with Colby in person would give them a better understanding of things, like his body language. Colby expressed genuine concern for Jody's safety, but the detectives remained uncertain about whether he was involved in her disappearance. To ensure that Colby was indeed in Dallas as he claimed, they subpoenaed all of his cell phone and credit card records. These records confirmed Colby's location and provided insight into his movements in the days before Jody's disappearance. Colby's records were returned to detectives, and they revealed he was not making any calls that hit off any towers close to Arkansas City. This was between the time that Jody went missing and his credit card statement showed he was using his card in Texas. Along the way from Texas to Kansas, he was using his car while driving at various locations, so the detectives cleared him from suspicion. He was not in town at the time that she went missing. Everyone in this close-knit community banded together in a search for Jody Sanderholm. The concerted community members took various actions to assist in the search. Worried residents distributed countless flyers with Jody's picture, making copy after copy of them. They went all around town, dropping them off in various stores and putting them up on telephone poles. These flyers described Jody as 5 feet 3 inches tall, weighing 105 pounds with brown hair and brown eyes. They also provided details about her last outfit. She was seen by her friends at dance wearing a black leotard, gray cut-off sweat shorts, a black and red Cali College dance line jacket with the word Tigerettes on the back, and her name, Jody, embroidered on the front, along with a pair of blue flip-flops. In addition to distributing the flyers, people tied pink ribbons on the trees throughout Arkansas City to honor Jody. The ribbons served as a reminder of her and as a symbol for everyone in the community to come together and support her family during this difficult time. To help the Sanderholm family, friends and relatives brought over food and comforted them during this challenging period while they waited to hear news about Jody's disappearance. All the dance classes at Ark City Dance were canceled, and instead, nearly 200 people showed up to Ark City Dance to hold a candlelight vigil for Jody. Everyone in Arkansas City was shocked that a young woman, only 19 years old, and with so much ahead of her, could just vanish into thin air. During school lunch periods at our Kansas City school, students actually raised money to help feed the police officers and the first responders searching for Jody. Other people in the community raised money to search for Jody by selling stickers and t-shirts. Teenage girls were living in fear. They were worried that this could happen to them. Jody's disappearance instilled a sense of vulnerability, causing a lot of teenage boys to take extra precautions to ensure the safety of their female friends. No one wanted to travel alone. As the search for Jody continued, detectives discovered CCTV footage of her at the Arc City subway salon shop at approximately 1 p.m. January 5th, the day she disappeared. This really helped them with a timeline to further gather information. The police conducted an interview with a girl who actually made Jody's sandwich that day. This girl happened to be a former girlfriend of Jody's older brother Jason, so they knew each other. Remember, this is a small town. That is not uncommon. She provided some valuable insight into Jody's state of mind and her demeanor on the day she disappeared. According to the former girlfriend, Jody was in good spirits when she saw her that day. She said that Jody was really excited about her pregnant sister. She talked about how she was thrilled to become an aunt and couldn't wait. With Jody's disappearance making headlines across our Kansas City, the police department was inundated with tips. Suddenly, so many people were reporting seeing Jody's dodge. The officers found themselves faced with the daunting task of verifying each and every one of these leads and determining whether they were relevant or not. The Arc City Police received information from an anonymous caller suggesting a possible connection between Jody's disappearance and the unsolved case of another Jody. There was a TV anchor, Jody Hentroop, who went missing in the mid-1990s in Mason City, Iowa. However, upon further investigation, detectives noticed several similarities in the case, but they ruled out any connection because there was a significant time gap between the two Jodys disappearing. It would be kind of odd if people were kidnapped or disappeared because of their first name, but I understand that everyone has to offer something if they feel it's relevant. An investigation was conducted to determine whether Jody's disappearance was the result of jealousy or foul play. The detectives interviewed every member of the CI College dance team, the Tigerettes, to gain information about their relationship with Jody and to see if anyone had a motive to hurt her. Through their investigative work, the detectives were able to gather evidence to conclude that none of the girls were responsible for Jody's going missing. It's not usually a female perpetrator. It can be, but that would be very unusual. Detectives called upon the residents of our Kansas City to assist them in searching for Jody's missing Dodge Stratus. The car was considered crucial evidence because Jody had been seen in it before she went missing. Residents wanted to help in any way that they possibly could. They organized themselves into search parties and began looking through garages, outbuildings, and barns for any trace of the car. However, their searches proved fruitless. On January 6, 2007, just one day after Jody went missing, her sister Jennifer woke up having contractions. Her husband was pleading and begging her to go to the hospital, but Jennifer's mind was consumed with thoughts of her sister Jody. She couldn't focus on anything else, not even going into labor. She had been neglecting her basic needs, eating, drinking, and sleeping, while trying desperately to locate her sister. Despite her advanced pregnancy, all Jennifer could think about was Jody and where she was. Jennifer, of course, wanted to stay updated on the search for her sister while she was giving birth, but she didn't want her mother, Cindy, to know she was in labor. She knew it was going to be so important for her mom to remain in our Kansas City and search for Jody rather than drive to Kansas City to be with Jennifer. It would break Cindy's heart when she learned that Jennifer was in labor and she couldn't be with her. Jennifer didn't want her mother to feel any more guilt than she already did, so she kept quiet. That must have been a lot to go through. I cannot imagine any of this. The next day, on January 7th, Jennifer gave birth to her baby girl and named her Emma Jolie. The Jolie part was a combination of Jody's first name and her middle name, Leanne. Jody's best friend, Lori, couldn't shake the unease that consumed her since Jody had disappeared. With every moment that passed, her mind raced with thoughts of where her best friend could be. She desperately thought of any clues or leads that might help the police. and one memory stood out in Lori's mind that she thought could be related to Jody's disappearance. There was an incident that occurred a few days before Jody went missing. Lori told detectives that back on Tuesday, January 2nd, she thought that someone could have been stalking her. She had just gotten off work at a local steakhouse. It was around 10 o'clock that night when she noticed there was a light blue Cadillac in the parking lot, kind of driving around the restaurant. Then, when she got in her car, she realized it was behind her, following her home. At first, of course, she wasn't going to jump to conclusions, but after a few blocks, Lori decided to test this vehicle's behavior. She started to intentionally make random turns, go down different streets, stop, and try to see if this car kept up with her. To her surprise, the Cadillac mirrored every one of her actions, which of course made her even more concerned. She was scared and didn't know what was happening. So she decided to do something clever. She drove straight to the local Arc City Police Department, and the Cadillac continued to follow closely behind her. This made her even more concerned, so she pulled into the police department parking lot. She didn't want to get out of her car and didn't want to leave. Instead, she remained inside and waited to see if the Cadillac would pass her. She told detectives that she thought it was really strange. She was scared and just remained in the police parking lot for several minutes, making sure the Cadillac was gone. However, after waiting and not seeing the vehicle any longer, Lori decided to return home. She went through the back roads and again, out of nowhere, the same car was tailing her. So she made it back to the police station, and this time she stayed even longer, making sure the car was completely out of sight. When she left again, this time she wasn't followed the rest of the way home. That is really terrifying and scary, and despite being as scared as she was, she did not report this incident to the police because in her mind, she really wasn't sure if this was some kind of prank or if she was just being overly paranoid. But now she wasn't so sure because, as Lori reflected on that incident, she recalled that she saw that same exact vehicle in the college parking lot on the morning of Friday, January 5th, the day that Jody disappeared. However, there was one crucial difference from the previous encounter. This time, Lori had a clear view of the driver, and she told detectives she knew who it was when she saw him that day. It was a fellow Arkansas City native, 23-year-old Justin Thurber. Lori knew exactly who Justin was, even though he was not in their circle of friends since he was a few years older than them. She recalled that back when she was in the 8th grade, Lori's older brother had some friends over, and one of them was Justin. Throughout Justin's time at her house, Lori felt uncomfortable because he would just sit there and stare at her, which made her feel really uncomfortable and weird to the point she asked her brother to make him leave. Knowing she had that encounter with this driver of the blue Cadillac that she knew was following her a few nights before this, and now she saw him in the parking lot where they were having their dance practice. Knowing Justin was creepy, Lori figured she would let detectives know. She provided them with his name and a description of his vehicle. It was actually only 10 hours after Jody was last seen, at approximately 10 p.m. on the night of January 5th, that Lori came forward with this information about Justin. Right afterward, an officer went over to his home. He lived with his parents at the time. Upon reaching the Thurber residence, the officers noticed that the house was only 4 blocks away from where Jody's family lived. It was a 2-minute drive on the same street, 14th Street. He lived at 1229 North 14th Street. Initially, Justin denied even knowing Jody or, of course, having anything to do with her disappearance. Justin also denied ever being in Jody's vehicle, since that one person had witnessed a guy beside her on January 5th. However, upon further questioning, he finally admitted to seeing her around town, but insisted he did not know her personally. He just knew of her. Justin also had an alibi for the day that Jody went missing. He said he was actually out of town in Winfield, which is a 20-minute drive a couple of towns away. He met up with some friends, and they were driving around town in his friend's vehicle when it veered off the road and got stuck in the mud near a place called Cedar Vale, which was about a 40-minute drive from Arkansas City. According to Justin, an argument broke out between him and his friends, and he decided to leave the group. He claimed he walked for some time until he got to an area where his dad could pick him up off of US Route 166. But what detectives thought was strange was, then how did your car end up back in the driveway at home? He told them that one of his friends picked it up for him and brought it back. Justin was asked to provide the names of the guys he was with that day, and he did. The detectives took note of them so they could be called for interviews to confirm his alibi. However, Justin's father, Kevin Thurber, did corroborate a portion of the alibi. He said that he did pick up his son a few miles from Sea State Fishing Lake, which was about 17 miles from Cedar Vale, and that's where Justin said he left his friends. That was about a 19-minute drive from Arkansas City. While investigators checked on all this information, they got a report of where Jody's phone pinged last. It was off a tower near a very vast nature preserve called the CA Wildlife Area that I mentioned earlier. It consists of over 4,000 acres of land, dense forest, muddy riverbanks, man-made wetlands, and open fields. It's not a place that Jody would be going, and we know that that day she had plans with Lori to be at their friend's house. The CA Wildlife Area is about 6 miles away and not anywhere she planned to be. This was concerning, but it also gave them a location to pinpoint and start searching for Jody's vehicle. They had planes flying overhead to see if it was abandoned somewhere, but there was no sign of the Dodge Stratus. They knew that searching this vast area would be quite an undertaking, but it was the last known location they had for Jody, or at least her cell phone. But there was something else, a bigger reason that they thought the CA Wildlife Area needed to be their focus. After detectives spoke with both Lori and Justin, they became very suspicious of him. Eventually, they were able to get in contact with his ex-girlfriend, Alexis Schwartzel, and they interviewed her. She explained that she and Justin had been in a relationship for over 3 years, but she just ended it the year before, in 2006. According to Alexis, Justin exhibited abusive behavior towards her, especially during sex. In her experience, Justin was unable to even become aroused unless he inflicted violence on her, such as choking or violently pulling her hair. As this obsession of his seemed to progress, it got worse. In order for him to climax, it had to be more and more intense, and that was a cause for concern. But remember, the CA Wildlife Area? While Alexis informed the detectives that Justin talked about that area before they had been there, he really liked this expanse of rugged terrain. It held a particular allure for him, not just because he liked the outdoors, but there was one disturbing piece of information that Alexis shared with detectives. According to her, Justin had once mentioned to her that it would be pretty simple to get rid of a body in this area. He told her that the rough terrain and heavy rainfall made it very likely that evidence of a crime would be washed away. That's a really weird thing to say, right? I mean, detectives thought it was coupled with his propensity for harming females, especially in a sexual manner. All the signs pointed to Justin at this point. Alexis even drove with one of the detectives out to the CA Wildlife Area and showed them a dock where she and Justin had once gone, and it was around that area that he made that comment about it being a great place to dump a body. This information about Justin's preoccupation with the preserve piqued the interest of the detectives, so they began focusing their search for Jody in that area. They had to gather the right manpower, though. Meanwhile, in order to gather more clues connecting Jody to Justin, the detectives requested CCTV footage from the parking lot of CI College to search for images of Justin's blue Cadillac. They also ran a background check on him and began interviewing people who knew him. When questioning former classmates and acquaintances of Justin, they were informed that, as a child, he was bullied a lot. The other children actually gave him the name Monkey Boy, and this was due to his prominent facial features. Then, while in high school, Justin did have a brief experience on the Arkansas City High School football team, but it was short-lived. His favorite recent pastime was actually playing bingo with his mother. It didn't seem that he had much of a social life, and we know his girlfriend had recently dumped him. As a matter of fact, one of Justin's childhood friends was Justin's ex-girlfriend's brother, Jason. I hope that's not confusing. His ex-girlfriend's brother. They were friends, and when he was interviewed, he described Justin as a bully. Jason claimed that there was one time when he and Justin were just driving around, and there was this child that walked in front of them. For some reason, Justin got angry that this child was walking too slowly. So he got out of his car, took off his belt, and chased this poor child down the street, actually starting to whip him. Jason, shocked that his friend was doing this, jumped out of the car and of course stopped Justin from attacking this poor child. According to Jason, this wasn't a one-time incident. There were at least, in his recollection, 2 other times that Justin had acted violently in front of him. He said it was Justin's bullying that ended their friendship. As adults, when Jason's sister Alexis started to date Justin, he stayed as far away from him as possible. He wanted nothing to do with Justin. Another person, Pat Thomas, one of Justin's neighbors who lived right across the street from him his entire life, claimed that Justin terrorized everyone in their neighborhood. According to Pat, there were instances where Justin would go into her backyard without her permission, and when she would yell at him to leave, Justin would just stare at her without any response. And other people said, when they watched Justin taking his shirt off and pacing outside of his house, yelling and screaming, it was like a normal occurrence. He would do this to intimidate people, kind of like puffing up his chest and just walking around, yelling and screaming and acting tough. Strange, but it gets stranger and it gets worse. Since Justin was a teenager, he had a reputation for being creepy around women. We already heard this from Lori, but this reputation followed him from his teenage years into adulthood. When Justin was only 13, he shared with a friend that he actually frequently peeked into Jody and Jennifer Sanderholm's bedroom window while they were getting dressed, and he also watched them while they were swimming. At the time, Jennifer would have been around 12 years old, and Jody would have just been 9. This shows you that not only was he committing peeping and even stalking behavior, but specifically in regard to Jennifer and Jody. To make matters worse, Justin claimed that he continued to spy on Jody's sister, Jennifer, when she was a teenager. He confessed to watching her when she was working at Blockbuster, so it seems like he had this fascination with the Sanderholm sisters. With Jennifer out of the picture, married and now in Kansas City, it looked as though Justin may have increased his focus on her younger sister, Jody. Another tigerette who danced with Jody, her name was Elizabeth Rush. She recalled an incident on January 4, 2007, the day before Jody's disappearance, while leaving practice. She saw Justin's blue Cadillac exiting the college parking lot. It also turned out that Justin had a prior criminal history that included robbery, theft, drug possession, reckless driving, all kinds of traffic infractions, and driving without proof of insurance. Just that month, on January 1st, Justin was arrested for impersonating a police officer and for disorderly conduct. However, during Justin's arrest, he was sitting in the back of the cop car, complaining, like holding his chest, acting like he was having a heart attack. The police have a responsibility. They will be liable if anything goes wrong, medically. So they took him to the hospital instead of jail, even though they suspected that this was all fake. For some reason, after he was discharged as a patient of the hospital, he was not rearrested. Back in 2004, he was arrested and charged with being in possession of an illegal substance. He was released and then put on probation, but just 3 months later he violated that probation and committed theft, so he was arrested again. But it seems like somehow he always found his way out of trouble. It's said that his uncle was actually a Cow County police officer, so maybe he had some legal help of some kind, but it didn't keep him from getting into trouble. Less than a year later, in October of 2005, he was once again arrested for disorderly conduct, but he didn't stay in jail for long. He was out again and just months later arrested for petty theft and again possession of illegal substances. Between 2005 and 2006, Justin was employed at a recycling factory operated by American Waste Management Incorporated. During this time, he filed 2 workers' compensation claims. An investigator was then looking for Justin to talk to him about these so-called claims. Several months before Jody's murder, Justin moved out of his parents' home on 14th Street and into a mobile home on US Route 166. While he was living there, he was trying to evade the workers' compensation investigator, so he removed the address from his mobile home. However, he was having a lot of trouble making his rent payment, and he got an eviction notice. He was supposed to leave by January 1st. Well, most recently, on the day before, on December 31st, 2006, less than a week before Jody went missing, Justin was arrested for theft, but he was able to make his bail, and he was free the same day. But not for long. I told you on January 1st, the day he was being forced to move out of his trailer, he was charged with pretending he was a police officer. It's not a surprise. He clearly thought he was above the law. He even really wanted to work as a bail bondsman. Justin had aspirations of working for a man named Roger White at Morrison Sons Bail Bonds, but he was never hired. I wonder why. Well, after pretending he was a police officer, Justin was taken into custody. That was the moment he was acting like he was having a heart attack. But get this, just a few days later, on January 5th, the same day that Jody disappeared, the bail bondsman that he wanted to work for, Roger White, received a call from Justin. He was playing cop again and claimed to Roger that he was following a wanted person, and he gave Roger the person's location. Upon further investigation, it was revealed that the person that Justin claimed to have spotted was not even the person they were looking for. It's interesting that he found time to do that when he told detectives that he was out of town, getting stuck in the mud with friends. Remember that story? But I think one of the even more interesting facts was that since December, Justin had been working at Subway, the same place where Jody was last seen, and where Jody's brother Jason's ex-girlfriend worked. Remember her? She was interviewed already about Jody's demeanor on the day that she disappeared. That is a connection right there. That Subway was only about 4 minutes away from Jody's house. She most likely frequented it a lot, or at least enough for Justin to have seen her there. But there was an even bigger connection. Remember the CCTV footage that the investigators requested? Well, it revealed that on the same day, January 5th, a blue Cadillac matching Justin's was right behind Jody as she was driving into the college for dance practice that morning. However, this was not the only time that Justin's vehicle appeared in the footage. They also noticed his car pulling up to the college parking lot several times in the days leading up to Jody's disappearance. Now investigators want to interview all the other girls on the Tigerettes to see if they noticed this. A dancer of the college dance team, Sta Barrera, informed the police that Justin had once left a note and a rose on the hood of her car. She found it one day after practice. However, she threw it out without even reading it. Then she stated that Justin would text her and call her persistently for a pretty long period of time, but it eventually just stopped. I guess he moved on to his next victim, and that could have been Jody Sanderholm. This was enough probable cause to get an arrest warrant for Justin, especially for his previous crime of impersonating a police officer and for apparent trespassing on the college campus. He had no reason to be there. So on Saturday, January 6th, 2007, just one day after Jody's disappearance, Detective Eric Mata arrested Justin on a bond revocation and suspicion of criminal trespass. It was at 9:45 p.m., on his way home from playing bingo with his mother, when he got to the station. Justin said that he wanted to speak to his attorney, so there was no questioning done at this time. However, after Justin's arrest, a team of crime scene investigators arrived at his parents' home with a search warrant. They wanted to gather any evidence that linked him to Jody's disappearance. While they meticulously searched through Justin's belongings, detectives were questioning his parents. Justin's father, Kevin, once again told them the information about picking Justin up at the Cow County State Fishing Lake at approximately 6:50. After Justin called him, he further explained that when he picked him up, Justin was wet and muddy. After arriving home, his dad said that he showered and did a load of laundry, washing all the clothes he was wearing. His dad claimed that he actually witnessed Justin rinsing off his muddy white Adidas sneakers in the sink and even asked for his father's help getting off the set-in mud. The detectives wondered if it was possible that Justin was trying to get rid of evidence connecting him to Jody's disappearance. The detectives advised Kevin to direct them to these shoes that he had seen his son cleaning that night. They were still wet and sitting on a towel by the front door. During the search of Justin's parents' house, the police confiscated several items. They collected Justin's clothing he was wearing that night, his cell phone, and they even impounded his blue Cadillac. Disturbingly, while looking in Justin's room, an investigator came across a knife with a spot of what looked like dried blood on it. Everything, including the sneakers, the clothing, the cell phone, and the knife, were sent to the state crime lab in Topeka, Kansas, for analysis. Meanwhile, after arriving at the Kansas City Police Department, Justin told a law enforcement officer he wanted to speak with Detective Ma, who agreed and met him in a holding room. That's when Justin said he wanted to get this over with and wanted to be transported to the county jail. But then he shifted gears and told Detective Ma he would talk to him if his attorney came to the police station. So Ma asked Justin for the attorney's phone number, and he said it was back at his parents' house. But he also said, "Oh, my attorney was probably out drinking at a local bar. You could find her there." Well, before doing all that, the detective tried to get Justin to talk by mentioning that they had spoken to his ex-girlfriend, Alexis, and that she told him about the recent breakup, but Justin didn't respond. So Ma tried bringing up the bond revocation, but still, Justin wouldn't speak. Ma even asked him again where he was on January 5th between 11 p.m. to get a formal statement. That is when Justin requested his attorney for basically the third time. But Ma responded, "It's probably not a good idea that she comes down here if she was at a bar drinking." So Justin said he wanted his father with him before he would talk. He also requested his mother be allowed in the room. Ma said that Justin would have to waive his rights to be silent and to an attorney if his parents were allowed in there. Justin agreed. When his parents arrived, Justin was allowed to speak with them privately. Afterward, Detective Ma came back. He asked Justin, "Are you ready to give that statement?" And Justin replied that he's not talking. He's not going to answer any questions without his attorney. So of course, Detective Ma became agitated. Remember, Justin had promised to waive his rights and talk. He told Justin, "I am not going to be playing these games with you," and he proceeded to go through the standard procedure of taking photos of Justin. But Detective Ma was armed with some new information that he had gathered about an incident that had just occurred a month before Jody went missing. At that moment, he decided to confront Justin with the claim that he had been stalking a woman named Nicole Topper Hayes, a former employee of Subway where Justin worked. Nicole reported an incident to the police in December of 2006. According to Nicole, one day while she was working with Justin, he placed a red rose and a romantic note on her car. While working, Justin would frequently talk to Nicole about several of the other women who worked there, and Nicole said that Justin would even follow female employees home after they got off work. According to Nicole, she opened Subway at 6:30 on January 3rd, 2007. This was just 2 days before Jody went missing. Nicole said that when she arrived outside the restaurant, Justin was waiting there. Justin told her he needed a ride because his car broke down. Well, Nicole made it clear to him she would not be giving him a ride anywhere. However, she did offer to let him use the phone inside, but he declined. Then about 10 minutes later, as Nicole was busy opening up and doing all the procedures for Subway, she noticed that Justin was driving by several times in his blue Cadillac, which seemed to be working just fine. On January 4th, just 1 day before Jody's disappearance, Nicole actually contacted the police to make a report regarding the concerning stalking behavior that Justin was exhibiting. Nicole expressed her fear of Justin and even asked the police to escort her to work. The police chief, Sean Wallace, was concerned about Justin's behavior, yet despite Nicole's fears, there was no evidence available that would warrant an arrest of Justin for any criminal offense at that time. I guess it's not illegal to put a rose and a note on someone's car, or wait for them, or maybe even ask them a million times to go out with them. But where do you draw the line? That's a really good question. However, later that day, Nicole arrived at Subway, and she was with her police escort. Upon arrival, she discovered a piece of wood jammed into the lock at the restaurant, indicating that someone had tried to break in. This made her even more scared, paranoid, and full of anxiety, and it reinforced her belief that Justin posed a threat to her safety and possibly the safety of others. But nothing was done about this. Justin actually went into the Kansas City Police Department himself and met with the Chief of Police, Sean Wallace. During their conversation, Justin raised concerns about the scrutiny he was facing from the police department regarding several stalking claims that he claimed were unfounded. Justin expressed his frustration that the police officers were targeting him and causing him stress. And that's interesting. Several stalking claims, and yet here we are. When Detective Ma confronted Justin about these claims, that's when he asked if the detective could promise he would not charge Justin for stalking if he gave his formal statement about his whereabouts on January 5th. Ma said he couldn't make any promises, but he would have someone come in and speak with him. So around 11 p.m., KBI Special Agent David Feta joined the questioning. Feta gave Justin a written Miranda warning waiver and began reciting it. But before he could even finish, Justin, he loves to play cop, interrupted and started listing off his rights himself, saying he already knew them. Of course he did. So Justin then completed and signed the waiver. Feta told him he understood that Justin had previously requested an attorney, but he told him that now, since you've recontacted us and asked for Detective Ma, you're allowed to speak with us because you came to us. So Justin agreed, and he then told Ma and Feta about his whereabouts the day before. Justin said that he woke up at 11 in Plank. A man drove around for a short period before stopping at a gas station. Around this time, he was pulled over for a traffic violation. At around noon, he parked near Subway and waited for his friend Travis to bring him a computer and shoes, which he claimed that Travis had stolen from him. Travis arrived, according to him, around 20 minutes later, and they left in Travis's car headed for Winfield. But didn't he already tell detectives that he drove his own car out there and he left it? And why was he with a guy that he accused of stealing from him? It seems odd. Well, in this version, Justin explained that they intended to meet with another individual named Matt, but he never showed up. So that's when they drove to a town called Dexter, about 25 minutes away. The car got stuck on a field access road. The two of them then got into an argument, and that's when Justin said he decided to walk home. But at this point, it's a 9-hour walk from this area. Yeah, and he tells these detectives he walked for a good 6 hours before calling his father, who eventually came to pick him up. His dad said he picked him up a little over a mile west of the county state fishing lake. Then he went to Subway to pick up his paycheck in his car. If I did the math correctly, he's basically telling detectives that Travis picked him up around 12:20 p.m. at Subway. They drove out to Winfield. That took approximately 14 minutes. They'd arrive at, let's say, 12:35 or so. Then they waited for their friend, but he never showed up. So they drove to Dexter. Well, I don't know when they left for this next stop, but it would take them around 25 minutes to drive there. So maybe we can put them arriving at around 1 p.m. or somewhere around that time. But of course, we have to account for the car getting stuck. He says he walked 6 hours and his dad picked him up at 6:50, a mile west of the state fishing lake. All this information didn't check out. It would give Justin from about 11 a.m. about 7 p.m. to have kidnapped Jody if he was responsible. Well, during the interview, the detectives confronted Justin with the fact that his blue Cadillac had been seen driving around the Cal College campus parking lot when the Tigerettes were practicing that morning. That means between the hours of about 10 o'clock and 11 a.m., Justin told the police his mom, his sister, and even his ex-girlfriend all had keys to his car, so it could have been one of them behind the wheel. But doesn't that seem kind of unlikely? That he's just waking up and, before he gets up, his mom, sister, or ex-girlfriend is driving his car to the college? I mean, maybe. But then he's at the gas station, not too long after, and then meeting his friend, even though at this point it was late into the early morning hours of January 7th. Maffetti and another officer drove Justin out east of town so he could show them where the car broke down, but he couldn't find the location. So they brought him back to the station, where he then volunteered to give them a polygraph. That would all have to come later because it was around 3:30 in the morning at this point, so they ended the interview at approximately 3:50 a.m. Sheriff's Deputy Joe Owen drove Justin to the Cy County Jail to be held. On the way, Justin told the officer he wanted to talk to Ma or Fetty again, but he also wanted his relative, another officer named Chad Malone, to be present. I told you that someone, I think it was an uncle, worked at the police station. Maybe that's why he got in and out of trouble before. But it turned out Justin actually wanted to talk to all of them to report his friend Travis for stealing from him, not to offer any information related to Jody's case, so it didn't go anywhere. However, once Justin was in police custody, they were able to obtain a sample of his DNA. Okay, enough with Justin and what he was doing for now. I want to focus on the search and the investigation. The lab technicians thoroughly searched for evidence by examining Justin's shoes. They conducted tests on the knife that they got from his room and by going through his car and his clothing, but they were not able to find anything significant. However, when a search was conducted around the Sanderholm residence, investigators came across a footprint near the row of mailboxes at the end of Jody Street. It looked as though it could match the Adidas shoes that were confiscated from Justin's house, so they took a cast of the print. Then, detectives with the Arkansas City Police Department called in trackers to help them explore the sea wildlife area for any evidence concerning Jody's appearance. These trackers are Ron and John Cannon, brothers who own and work for a company called Blue Line Tracking. They provide training and assistance to law enforcement agencies using proven methods and techniques to locate things like footwear impressions at suspected crime scenes. They were firefighters who, in their spare time, trained in the science and art of tracking. They were equipped with flashlights, pens, paper, tape measuring devices, and flags to mark evidence. The trackers met at the boat dock at the sea wildlife area to begin their search, and that is where Justin's ex-girlfriend had directed authorities during the interview. Upon the trackers' arrival, they were handed a photocopy of Justin's Adidas sneakers, along with pictures of the tread on the bottom and the shoes' measurements. As the trackers made their way through this wildlife area, they eventually came across several impressions along a dirt road. The trackers noticed a peculiar pattern with these shoe prints. There were actually two sets, a bigger one and a smaller one. The smaller prints were parallel to the main set of shoe impressions. They suspected that the larger shoe prints may belong to their suspect, Justin Thurber, and that the smaller ones could be Jody's. But what was really weird to them was that at one point along the path, the smaller set of shoe prints kind of came to a stop, but the bigger prints kept going down the path. So the trackers were deducing from this evidence that Jody's abductor might have forced her to walk into this wooded area, and at some point, she either stopped, she resisted, or she refused to go any further. That's when the suspect either rendered her unconscious or just possibly picked her up and carried her the rest of the way. That would explain the one set of bigger impressions. So, they took cement castings of all of these prints so they could compare them to the ones that they found at the mailbox near Jody's house. As darkness fell over the sea wildlife area, the trackers and detectives decided to call it a day until the following morning when the sun came out. But on their way home, Ron and JN approached the area where they heard that Justin's father told the police that he picked him up on January 5th. It was near the Cy County State Fishing Lake. On a hunch, the trackers decided to pull over and look in this area. They approached the lakeside restrooms, and they noticed a dirt transfer on a concrete path nearby. The dirt was in the pattern of a tire track, and it came up over the sidewalk, as though someone had intentionally driven their vehicle up there. This piqued their interest and their curiosity, and it made them check the bathrooms. The first stop was the women's restroom, and upon entering, they didn't find anything significant. However, when they went into the men's room, in the first toilet, they discovered mail that was addressed to Jody's parents, Cindy and Brian Sanderholm. The trackers' attention then shifted to the second toilet, and upon closer inspection, they noticed additional items that they thought could belong to Jody. Knowing that they might have stumbled upon very significant evidence, the trackers left the restroom and contacted detectives immediately. Now, the restrooms at the lake were actually latrines. These are chemical toilets that don't run normal plumbing. Instead, they're emptied into large tanks. So, when investigators arrived, they had to thoroughly search through these tank reservoirs filled with human waste to look for evidence of Jody's. In addition to the mail that was addressed to Jody's parents, they also found a pair of ballet slippers, one blue flip-flop shoe that matched the smaller impressions that they found at the wildlife preserve, a red purse with a check inside that was made out to Jody, a wallet containing Jody's driver's license and social security card, a vehicle floor mat, and a car seat cushion. But as they continued their search, these next few items made their worst fears more of a reality. Sadly, they discovered a black dance leotard, a pair of gray cut-off sweatshorts, and a black and red tigerette jacket with the name Jody stitched on the front. On one hand, they knew that they were close to figuring out what happened to her, but knowing that these were the clothes that Jody was last seen wearing meant that they were taken off her body at some point. And that is not a good sign. None of this is good. After the investigators recovered Jody's items from the bathroom at the lakeside, they changed their search from a missing person to a body recovery. This is when the detectives decided to reach out to Jody's family to let them know that they needed to prepare themselves for the possibility that Jody may never be coming home. Because based on the evidence that they'd recovered, Jody had most likely been met with foul play. Jody's mother contacted Jody's sister Jennifer, who had just given birth, and Cindy informed her that the investigators had found Jody's clothing in the toilets at the state fishing lake. Jennifer was confused, and in that moment, without understanding what this really meant, she said, "So Jody's naked out there somewhere? It's January, and it's cold." But sadly, Cindy told Jennifer, no, most likely Jody was no longer alive. That moment, it finally hit Jennifer, and she realized her baby sister could be dead. Can you even imagine that feeling? It's heartbreaking, and yet they still don't know where Jody is. Well, a tip came in that led them to their next big break in the case. A construction worker named Kevin Pike approached the police with information regarding a very suspicious incident that happened on January 5th. Kevin claimed he was driving a load of rocks along US 166 when a black car began following him for several miles. Remember, Jody's car is black. Well, eventually, the black vehicle pulled ahead of Kevin and started to turn into the Sea State fishing lake. However, the car came to a complete stop really abruptly, causing Kevin to slam on his brakes. According to him, he had a clear view of the driver and the passenger through the car's sunroof because his truck was above the car. He was looking down. He stated that the driver matched the description of the suspect they arrested, Justin Thurber, and that the woman looked like Jody Sanderholm, and she was seated in the passenger seat. This information about the car and the people matching Jody and Justin's descriptions being close to the CI County State fishing lake, where the tire tracks were and all of her personal items were found, led investigators to believe that Jody's 2003 Dodge had been driven into the lake by the perpetrator to be disposed of, and that Jody could possibly still be inside. This suspicion prompted the detectives to contact Tim Miller. He's the Texas EquuSearch founder. Now, Texas EquuSearch, I'm sure you've heard of it before. It's an organization that's dedicated to locating missing people. It's a nonprofit organization that operates across the United States. They utilize a team of volunteers, and they're specialized in using equipment to aid in their search efforts. Now, Tim Miller's daughter, Laura, was abducted and murdered in 1984, and ever since, he's been dedicated to helping other families in similar situations. He said he promised God and Laura that he would never leave a family alone who's missing a loved one. Determined to locate Jody, Tim Miller grabbed a group of his volunteers immediately and went to Arkansas City. He was equipped with sonar equipment, and they arrived to search for Jody's car underwater in the lake. But a snowstorm was approaching, and the search for Jody intensified. The detectives knew that time was running out and that they were going to risk losing valuable evidence. They had to make significant progress before the storm hit. Tim Miller was preparing to embark on the lake in their boat. The team was ready to begin their search, equipped with the latest high-tech sonar system. As soon as the team left the dock, Jody's car suddenly appeared on the left-hand side of the sonar screen that Tim was viewing from the boat. A diver was then sent down from the police department, and he verified that the vehicle was indeed Jody's black 2003 Dodge Stratus. He confirmed this with the license plate, so they prepared to retrieve the car. Once it was above the water, it was put on a tow truck and brought to the police department for processing. At this time, they also discovered Jody's matching flip-flop. Jody's car had been immersed in water for 4 days, and the water pressure caused the sunroof to pop open, filling it with water and, of course, causing it to sink. Given the condition of the vehicle, detectives knew that obtaining forensic evidence from it would be very challenging. However, they understood the need to try anyway. Everyone was being as diligent as they could, and while Jody's car was being discovered at the lake, the trackers were venturing through the sea wildlife area. Finally, they came across a large disturbance in the dirt by a woodpile that seemed like it was intentionally stacked in a very weird manner. The trackers' curiosity piqued, so they cautiously approached the spot. Turning to the detective that was accompanying them, one of the trackers confidently declared, "I have her." As the detective walked toward the woodpile, he noticed a small hand sticking out. As they removed the pile of branches and sticks one by one, they discovered the deceased and nude body of a young female. She was in a horrific state. There were deep bruises covering her entire body. The detectives were immediately able to confirm the identity of this female as Jody Sanderholm, and that was due to a unique birthmark on her chest, which her family had described to them earlier in this investigation. Her body was transported to the medical examiner's office in Wichita for an official identification and autopsy. Though they had only preliminarily identified Jody, they were certain enough it was her. The detectives called to inform Jody's parents about the discovery and that she had been killed. Her father, Brian, had still been holding on to a small piece of hope that she would come walking through the door. Knowing that she wouldn't was overwhelming. Cindy was in total shock when she heard the news that her daughter had been murdered. The revelation hit her hard, and the pain of losing her youngest child was unbelievable. For Jody's sister, Jennifer, learning of her sister's death was very challenging because Jennifer was already dealing with hormonal changes after giving birth to her daughter, and she found it difficult to process these conflicting emotions. On one hand, she was filled with happiness and excitement. She was a new mom. But on the other hand, she was consumed by sadness over the loss of her sister. Within a matter of days, she'd experienced the most beautiful and precious moment of her life, only to have it followed by the worst news she could ever get. For Lori, learning that her best friend had been murdered left her in a state of disbelief. She never would have imagined that something like this could happen to either of them. I don't think any of us think this could happen, but we know that it can, and it never gets any easier. During the search for Jody, the students and instructors at Arc City Dance lit candles in the front windows of the dance studio. They kept them lit until her body was discovered. Then they sadly blew them all out, signifying the loss of their hope for a happy ending. The dance studio hung a large photo of Jody with the inscription, "May we dance together again someday." Jody's murder had a profound impact on the community and the dance school. It became a place for everyone to come together to grieve. Pastors and counselors visited the dance school, and they spoke with students about Jody's death. They offered guidance and support during this difficult time. Despite the tragedy, Jody's murder also brought the town closer. People united in their shared grief and supported one another. Now, I try my best to balance telling you what the medical examiner found and being respectful of the victim. However, I do not want to water any of this down. What this monster did is too important to gloss over. It's crucial that you understand how evil he is and what this poor girl went through. A jury would have to hear it. And although I will leave out unnecessary information, I'm about to tell you one of the most horrific reports I've ever read. Dr. Obers conducted Jody's autopsy along with a special nurse who was trained in sexual assault examinations. Injuries that are sexual in nature are often found on those parts of the body. Jody's body was officially identified using dental records. She was bruised from her head to her toes. She had bruises all over her head, on her arms, on her torso, her lower back, her buttocks, and her legs. She had numerous defensive injuries indicating that she had fought for her life, and she fought hard. She had abrasions all over her back that were consistent with her being dragged across the ground. It was estimated that she was dragged at least 30 feet from where she was disrobed to the place where her body was found. There was evidence that she was struck so hard in the face that her neck snapped back, causing an artery to become lacerated. However, she could have still been alive, and it was the doctor's opinion that she was, considering some of the other injuries that I'm about to tell you about. They had signs of her heart still pumping based on what they looked like while she was most likely beaten and incapacitated. She was violated with a large stick, sodomized actually. There was tearing, bruising, and hemorrhaging in that area, and it was at least 2 inches deep. The other area was also impacted with wood debris. Her vaginal canal was full of sticks, leaves, and sand. These items were also found stuffed into her ear canals, packed tightly until nothing more could fit inside. The same sticks, leaves, and debris were found inside her mouth and down her throat, jammed inside. The medical examiner determined that Jody died from ligature strangulation and blunt force trauma. The doctor's expert opinion from the evidence was that she had been repeatedly strangled manually with some type of ligature. It could have been consistent with the strap of her own leotard. There were several areas that had marks consistent with representing multiple applications of pressure, so lines across her neck in various places. The coroner stated this bruising was consistent with repositioning of the hands or ligature, and this was done in a tightening and relaxing manner as she struggled to pull away. She had been tortured, and the medical examiner estimated that Jody was held for between 4 and 5 hours following her abduction up until her murder. Jody's estimated time of death was around 5:30 p.m., and she was last seen at Subway at 1 p.m. Additionally, the medical examiner noted that Jody's fingernail on her right hand was bent, indicating that she had scratched her murderer. In light of this, the medical examiner took clippings of all of Jody's nails and sent them for testing to determine if the suspect's DNA was present. Over 2,000 people showed up for Jody's memorial service at the W.S. Scott Auditorium and Cali College. It was a celebration of her life and was held at the place where she used to find her greatest joy, dancing. During the service, a slideshow of pictures of Jody was played with the song "Suddenly I See." The music perfectly captured the essence of Jody's vibrant personality. In addition to the slideshow, Dancing with Angels was played as well. The service lasted approximately an hour, leaving attendees with a heavy heart but fond memories of Jody. However, as the service came to an end, an unexpected twist occurred. The song "Everybody Dance Now" by C+C Music Factory blared over the speakers, instantly bringing smiles to everyone's faces. It was definitely a surprising choice, but it perfectly captured Jody's infectious spirit and sense of humor. This sudden change in tone at her memorial service caused a ripple effect among the attendees as they were leaving the auditorium. They broke into laughter, and there were smiles on their faces. It was almost as if Jody had orchestrated that moment herself, ensuring that her memorial service would be filled with joy and happiness, just as she would have wanted it. CA College established a memorial scholarship to honor Jody's memory and her legacy. As this investigation into her murder continued, the men who Justin claimed he was with that day came forward, and they had an alibi. He lied, big surprise there, so no one could account for his whereabouts on January 5th. Investigators began to focus on analyzing Justin and Jody's cell phone records. These records revealed that both their phones traveled together that day from the vicinity of Jody's house. About 40 minutes after it's believed she was taken, Jody's mom called her phone. The call went unanswered, yet she attempted to make a call back right afterward to her home, but no one picked up because no one was home. That was the last call made from Jody's cell phone. After that, it was powered off, probably by her assailant, which investigators definitely believe was Justin, since his phone pinged in the vicinity of the Clay County State Fishing Lake and the wildlife area at the times that they believe Jody was there, being murdered and tortured, as well as when her car was being dumped in the lake. Soon, evidence from the state crime lab began to return to the detectives, and even though it seemed impossible to find any evidence left behind in Jody's waterlogged car, the crime scene investigators took tape lifts off the seats. They collected thousands of tiny hairs and fibers, and these samples were then sifted through, requiring meticulous attention to detail. One investigator carefully removed a very small piece of human hair from the driver's seat. Everything found was sent to the lab for analysis. When the lab technicians conducted DNA testing on the skin cells found on Jody's fingernails and a piece of hair discovered in her car, The test results revealed that the DNA of the skin cells and that one single hair matched Justin Thurber's. This discovery came as no surprise to anyone involved in Jody's case, but the fact that these investigators were able to locate a single piece of Justin's hair and obtain mitochondrial DNA was surprising, especially after the car had been submerged for several days. It was truly remarkable. The detectives decided to send the cast of The Shoes to a man named Steve Koch. He was an expert with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation and specialized in forensic science. Steve was one of only 30 people with a specialization at the time for these types of foot impressions. He had studied over 1,000 criminal cases, focusing on analyzing shoe print evidence. Steve analyzed the footwear impressions at Jody's home and the wildlife area, and he determined that approximately 50 impressions at the Call wildlife area matched Justin's sneakers, as did the shoe print outside of Jody's home. Furthermore, 4 prints at the wildlife area were found to be a match to the flip-flops the detectives believed belonged to Jody. By matching Justin's shoe print to the one outside of Jody's home, the detectives were able to place Justin in the vicinity where her abduction took place at the time it took place. With all this evidence piling up against Justin, detectives increased his charges to capital murder, aggravated kidnapping, and aggravated sodomy. Justin was held on a $1 million bond. Ironically, Mr. I Want to Be a Cop called Roger White from the bail bond company that he wanted to work for, and he sought help securing his bail, but he was unsuccessful. The state informed the media that there was a possibility of this being a death penalty case due to the heinous and atrocious manner in which Jody was tortured and killed. When Cindy heard from the detectives that they had arrested a man from Arkansas City named Justin Thurber for Jody's murder, she had no idea who he was. However, she learned later that Justin had attended high school with her 2 older children, Jennifer and Jason. Cindy called her daughter, Jennifer, and told her to look Justin up in her yearbook. Jennifer, who had graduated the same year as Justin, couldn't remember much about him. Meanwhile, Darcy Swartzel, the mother of Justin's ex-girlfriend Alexis, and her brother Jason spoke out to the media following Justin's murder charges. Darcy said she was happy that her daughter and her granddaughter were safe. However, she also revealed details regarding the treatment that Justin had inflicted upon Alexis's little daughter, who was only 5 years old at the time. According to Darcy, Justin regularly tortured the little girl. He would throw her across the room aggressively, without any regard for her safety. Additionally, he would do things to upset this poor little child, like take food off her plate just to irritate her. As if that weren't enough, he would also break the legs off her dolls to make her cry. He's sick. He really is sick. Now, authorities were building their case to get justice for Jody. Since his arrest, the detectives learned that Justin's behavior had escalated in recent years. What was even more disturbing was the number of women who had come forward, accusing him of stalking them. These women shared similarities with Jody in terms of height, weight, and overall appearance. One woman told the police that when she was 14 in the year 2000, she was at a party and Justin tried to force himself on her. This woman said she kicked a wall and tried to scream, but Justin put a pillow over her face. Eventually, other party guests heard her screams and pushed through the door, which Justin had blocked. Michelle Hinn, a former employee of Kentucky Fried Chicken, spoke to the police about her experience with Justin. According to Michelle, in 2001, when she was just 16 years old and worked at KFC alongside Justin, who was her colleague, they were in a conversation one night through his open car window. He tried to force her inside by pulling her through the window. He got her inside and held her for hours. Eventually, he did let her go. She alleged that Justin would force her into his vehicle 3 more times within a month, despite not wanting to enter Justin's car. Michelle told police that she complied out of fear that Justin would get really angry. He would make threatening gestures, balling up his fists at her, which caused her to feel scared. There were instances where he would follow her in his vehicle. Also, in 2001, Justin followed a teenager from where she worked at Blockbuster Video. The teenager was terrified, and when she got home, she ran into her house and told her mom everything that had happened. Her mom ran outside and was able to write down the license plate of Justin's vehicle before he pulled away. When the police arrived at the scene at Justin's home later that night to speak to him, he refused to talk. Another woman came forward and informed the police about an incident involving Justin. According to her, in 2004, Justin had left a note in a locker inside the women's locker room at a wellness center in Arkansas City. He was asking her to have sex with him. The woman stated that she turned the note over to the police. 2 years after this incident, in July of 2006, Arella Vasquez, Justin's former girlfriend, met him outside of the county market in Arkansas City. When he approached, he mentioned wanting to show her a car for sale. She was looking for a vehicle at that time, but because she didn't speak English that well, she brought along an 11-year-old friend to interpret for her during this interaction. Justin agreed to show her the car and he drove her and her friend around, but instead of taking them back into town, once Justin reached a secluded location, he pulled out a knife and ordered the girls to get undressed. They were terrified, but somehow they managed to escape from the car and sought help, contacting the police. However, despite this traumatic incident, no charges were ever filed against Justin, not for any of these incidents at all. While Justin was incarcerated for Jody's murder and waiting for trial, you know what he did? He sent a letter from the county jail, postmarked October 22, 2007. This letter was addressed to a 20-year-old girl named Katie, and it ended up in her mailbox at the C College. Katie, like Jody, was a member of the Tigerettes. She immediately turned this letter over to the police. He really has no boundaries or limits when it comes to how sick and deranged he really is. He even torments girls from jail. While incarcerated, Justin was somehow able to get subscribed to an Arkansas City Traveler, a local newspaper. Through the subscription, he got the local newspaper and was able to look at pictures of Katie, the girl he sent a letter to. She was participating in a contest in the community during the fall, and in the letter that the police took, Justin referred to her as the most beautiful finalist. He told her he was looking for a friend, which could be the best friendship of her life. Before Justin Eugene Thurber's trial began, his defense attorneys filed a motion for a change of venue. They wanted to relocate the trial because they thought that too many people in town would have an impression of him, which could lead to potential prejudice. However, the judge denied the motion. The judge ordered Justin to undergo a mental health evaluation to determine if he was fit to stand trial. During this mental evaluation, Justin was observed for several months to assess his mental fitness. The court finally determined that he was fit to stand trial, even though his defense attorney put forth a claim that he had a history of mental illness, maladjustment, and behavioral control problems. They even had him evaluated by their own expert psychologist, Robert Barnett, who met with Justin multiple times while he was awaiting trial and conducted a psychological evaluation. He also reviewed all of Justin's medical records and concluded that he had very low mental functioning. They provided documentation from evaluations by licensed psychologists over the course of the past few years before Justin was arrested, showing that he was in and out of mental health facilities. At the last minute before Justin's trial, he tried to make a bargain with the state because he wanted to avoid being put to death. However, it was too late. As a result, the offer was turned down. Jody's family thought that Justin should be put to death for her murder. In February 2009, Justin Thurber's trial began. According to the prosecution, on July 5, 2007, Jody left dance practice at C College and Justin followed her. He knew her routine because he'd followed her on other occasions. He lived right down the street, where he most likely parked his car before waiting for Jody to arrive at the mailboxes, where his shoe impression was found. When she went to the mailboxes to retrieve the mail, Justin confronted her and somehow forced her to get into the passenger side of her own vehicle. Maybe this is when he hit her hard in the face, but he was able to gain control of her and her vehicle. Then Justin drove away with Jody inside. We know her mother tried to call her, and he powered her phone down to stop additional calls and perhaps keep her GPS from tracking. Cell phone records showed that Justin headed east on US 166 out to the Kaw Wildlife area, where he sexually violated and tortured Jody for hours. During this time, it's alleged that Justin killed Jody. After committing the murder, the state claimed that Justin drove to the C County State Fishing Lake at around 4:30. Man dumped all of Jody's belongings into the toilets. He then put her 2003 Dodge Stratus in drive and steered it into the lake, but not before ripping out the passenger seat. Apparently, it had either been completely removed or a portion of it had been cut out. Recall they said that a car seat cushion had been found in the waste reservoir. The prosecutor's theory was that there was biological matter left behind on the seat, and in his opinion, he thought it was ejaculatory fluid. He believed this was due to Justin's ex-girlfriend's claim that Justin became aroused during aggressive situations when he faced resistance. So as he was struggling with Jody, it stands to reason that he became aroused and climaxed at some point inside the vehicle. Then he removed the seat or cut portions of it out to hide evidence. Now, I couldn't find any solid proof of this, but I wanted to at least mention it. Following the disposal of Jody's body in her car, the state said that Justin walked a mile, wet and muddy, and then called his father to pick him up and bring him home. The state called over 60 witnesses to testify against Justin during his criminal trial. These witnesses provided compelling evidence and testimony supporting the state's case. Most of this information you have already heard from what I told you about the women who came forward to the police. One of the most important testimonies was from Alexis Schwartzel, who was Justin's ex. She testified about consensual sexual encounters, including one where Justin occasionally choked her during sex and would tighten and relax his grip around her neck. He had sodomized her with a small plastic item once while they were having sex at the Kaufman Wildlife Area. Her testimony suggested a lot of similarities with the medical testimony about Jody's injuries and cause of death. The evidence was overwhelming. When it came time for the defense to present their case, Justin opted not to take the stand, which was probably a good thing. Instead of presenting their arguments, Justin's defense attorneys waived their closing arguments, and this raised many people's eyebrows. It was like a signal that they were not disputing the state's evidence or case. By waiving their closing arguments, the defense attorneys appeared to the jury to be conceding Justin's guilt. The trial was a heart-wrenching experience for Cindy, Jody's mother, having to witness Justin just sitting in the courtroom, knowing that he was responsible for taking her daughter's life. On February 17th, the jury finally reached a verdict. They found him guilty on all counts, and they also recommended the death penalty. Jody's mom was pleased with the outcome. She believed that with this decision, Jody could finally rest in peace. During Justin's sentencing hearing, in an argument to try to spare his life, his attorney claimed he was bipolar and had an IQ that was lower than 80, which they claimed was in the range of mental retardation. Not my words, however. The state pointed out to the court that Justin was smarter than he appeared, and he did not meet the state threshold for mental retardation by definition. The prosecution argued Justin was calm during the search for Jody and that he was smart enough to hide evidence to evade capture. The state also noted that Justin graduated from high school and attended college. Cindy made a comment about the fact that she had heard he was writing to other women while he was in jail. She said, "That's sick. It's just sick. It tells you that he's competent enough to reach out to people and write letters. He knows what he's doing." After a month-long break, while the judge considered all the evidence, he sentenced Justin to death. Jody's father, Brian, was satisfied that Justin received the death penalty, stating that it renewed his faith in the system. Many people believe that if the police had not caught Justin when they did, he would have murdered someone else. In recent years, Kansas has been embroiled in a heated debate regarding the possibility of abolishing the death penalty. Jody's loved ones have been very vocal in their advocacy for retaining it. I would love your thoughts, even though I know it's a very controversial one. The Sardal family has made their presence felt at numerous hearings, sharing their story and the impact that Jody's murder has had on their lives over the years. Of course, Justin has filed a number of appeals trying to get his death sentence overturned. However, these appeals have been unsuccessful, and Justin resides on death row at the El Dorado Correctional Institution in Kansas. After the tragic loss of her daughter, Cindy found herself making significant changes in her life. Jody's murder had a profound effect on Cindy, leading her to hold her loved ones closer, communicate more freely with them, and be more honest with herself. Her newfound appreciation for life motivated her to cherish what she had and never take it for granted. Sadly, in 2022, Cindy's journey came to an end. She passed away on December 2nd. She was only 63 years old. Her online obituary is filled with heartfelt messages from family, friends, and even people like you and me who didn't know her but have heard Jody's story. Jody's father said that he believes if there had been tougher laws for stalking, his daughter would still be alive today. He believes that women would have reported Justin for his stalking behavior if there had been stronger laws in place. As a result, both he and Cindy proposed House Bill 2850, informally known as Jody's Law. This bill means there would be tougher sentencing laws and the removal of vague language. At the time of Jody's murder, the law required a credible threat for action to be taken. In February of 2008, Jody's Law received preliminary approval in the House of Representatives and was subsequently passed in Kansas. For college students, summer represents a break, an opportunity to relax, enjoy the warm weather, and create lasting memories with friends and family. It's a time to unwind, free from the stress of schoolwork and exams, at least for a couple of months. Many students seize the chance to take on a summer job, and that's exactly what a 19-year-old from Kansas City did in the summer of 2002. She landed a position as a pool attendant, eager to soak up the sun and mingle with others. Little did she know, this seemingly carefree job would soon set the stage for her tragic death. Now, you'll hear a chilling tale of a brutal murder, a heartbreaking loss for a family that never imagined something so horrific could happen to them, and a twist of fate that no one could have predicted. But you'll also hear about a community united in grief, a determined investigative team, and most of all, a father who refused to let his daughter's murder fade into obscurity. He dedicated himself relentlessly to finding the killer and ensuring justice was served. This story isn't just about a senseless crime, it's about a father's unwavering love and his fight for justice. This is the story of Ali Kemp. Ali Kemp was born on October 11, 1982 in Leawood, Kansas, to Kathy and Roger Kemp. They named her Alexandra Elizabeth, a name that means compassionate one and helper of mankind. Ali's dad said the day she was born was the happiest and luckiest day of his life. He called her Princess. Ali was definitely a daddy's girl. Roger and Kathy raised her in Leawood, alongside her two younger brothers, Tyler and Drew. Leawood is a bedroom community, an affluent part of Kansas City in the suburbs. People left their garage doors unlocked and open. Kids roamed freely, and they didn't think about crime. It was a safe place for Roger and Kathy to raise their 3 children, and the entire Kemp family was very happy there. Ali was also very close to her grandparents, who she affectionately referred to as Grammy and Gramps. When Ali was born, they decided their granddaughter deserved a special gift. They searched high and low for the perfect present that would reflect their love for her. Finally, they found a beautiful Precious Moments Bible. If you've never heard of Precious Moments, they're known for their collectible, cute little dolls and figurines that were popular in the 80s and 90s. The Precious Moments Bible was not just any Bible, but a special book filled with pictures of the characters, especially catered to children. As Ali grew up, she cherished this gift. It became a prized possession, a keepsake she held onto for many years. From the moment Ali could speak, she exhibited a thirst for knowledge. Whether Ali was asking why the sky was blue or why birds could fly, her endless curiosity excited her father. Whenever Ali asked why, Roger became excited to answer all of her questions. He loved engaging with Ali and teaching her about life and the world around her. Ali flourished in Leawood, and as she grew up, she became known around the community for her kindness, involvement, and bright megawatt smile. In middle school, Ali was voted the nicest girl in the 8th grade. In high school at Blue Valley North, Ali was elected to the Sweetheart Court in her junior year and appeared in the yearbook a whopping 13 times. She was a student ambassador, served on the student council, played varsity soccer, and was a member of the National Honor Society, where she was elected Sergeant of Arms and co-president of Future Business Leaders of America in her senior year. Her dad said that she loved high school and participated in everything. He said that she was into 19 different things in school. Ali's mom, Kathy, said that Ali had it all in one package. She wasn't perfect by any means, but she knew where she was going. No matter how busy Ollie got, she never lost her kindness. She always made time for those she cared about most. Allie had a lot of close friends who described her in ways that I have to share with you. Her friend Ashley said that, while being involved with so many things, one would think you would get too wrapped up and forget what's really important in life. But that was never the case with Allie. She always had time to say hello, or at least give you a smile. Sta knew Allie as one of the few people who, at any given moment, would drop everything if you needed a friend. Jennifer, one of Allie's closest friends, said she was always very collected, had her head on straight, and you knew if you told her absolutely anything, you could trust her with it. Allie would brighten everyone's day. Her friend Kristen looked forward to the fun that she had around Allie, who was described as even peppy in the mornings. There was never a dull moment with her. Even her guy friends took note of how happy she was. Louis said that Allie brought happiness everywhere she went, and you wouldn't even remember her ever being in a bad mood. She lived her life with no regrets. Allie was known to be popular and really smart, but she remained grounded and sweet. I think the best way this could be described is when her friend Isaac said, "Think of a blinding light shining brilliantly in the sky. Now put that same brilliance in a person." That's Allie. And I know it sounds cliché, but in Allie's case, she was really the type of person who would light up a room. Allie graduated from Blue Valley North in May of 2001, bringing her light and happiness to nearby Kansas State University. Allie showed the same drive and kindness in college that she did in high school. She joined the Pi Beta Kappa sorority, where she met some of her closest friends. She quickly became an involved member of the sorority and was elected as the chapter's Pan-Hellenic representative. Allie's pledge mother, Erin O'Brien, knew Allie as a bright woman who took on leadership roles in the sorority right away and seemed to get along with everyone. She said that nobody would have hated her. Nobody. But Allie wasn't just involved in her sorority. She was also dedicated to her schoolwork. In her freshman year, she finished in the top 10% of her class and was invited to join the honors program at Kansas State, as well as the National Society of Collegiate Scholars. She was also an academic scholar in the School of Human Ecology and a leadership scholar. Additionally, she played intramural soccer and basketball. Even though Allie wasn't in Leawood anymore, she didn't forget the relationships she had there. She called her mom almost every day, and Kathy said that was just who she was. She wanted her family to be involved in her life, to be a big part of it. One time, Allie was home from college and asked her mom to join her for lunch with some of her friends. As Kathy watched Allie cross the street, dressed casually but cute and sporting a ponytail, she couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for being the mother of such a beautiful young woman. Allie's beauty attracted many admirers, but her heart belonged to one person. That was Phil Howes, her high school boyfriend, who was attending a different college at the time. They were pretty serious. They even talked about a future together, but they were both still just freshmen in college, and they both wanted to experience college before settling down. Allie met Phil during gym class, their first year at Blue Valley North High School. Their connection was instant, and they quickly became inseparable. Their love only grew stronger over the years. One Valentine's Day, Phil pulled out all the stops and arranged a special dinner for Allie. Despite his very poor cooking skills, Phil put his heart and soul into the meal, even getting his entire family to go out of the house so he could have a moment alone with Allie. And as the night unfolded, Phil's spaghetti dinner turned out to be less than perfect. The noodles were overcooked, the sauce was bland, and the garlic bread was soggy. But despite the culinary mishaps, Allie was determined to make Phil feel loved and appreciated. She ate every bite, even insisting that the meal was perfect because she thought Phil was at least perfect for her. And if that love remained strong, then maybe they would end up together in the future. They believed they had all the time in the world to spend the rest of their lives together, if only they would have known how little time they really had left. Allie and her friends traveled to Florida for spring break in May of 2002. They spent their nights sitting around together, sharing stories and reflecting on their lives. It was a time for laughs and bonding, as well as reminiscing about their adventures and accomplishments in the last few months of their lives in the first year of college. During one of the heartfelt conversations, Allie made a comment that stuck with her friends. She told them that if she had to live her life over again, she would live it exactly the same way that she had. No regrets. Her statement struck a chord with her friends, who couldn't help but admire how confident Allie was, how she lived in the present, embracing each moment like it could be her last. And Allie's words would become a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the unpredictable nature of fate. Later that summer in 2002, Allie returned home from college for her break. She was staying with her family in their home in Leawood. She, her brother, and her boyfriend Phil all got jobs at the local Foxborough pool on 123rd Street and State Line Road. This pool was exclusively for Foxborough and Hunter Ridge residents. It's a popular, family-friendly spot to hang out in the summer if you're in the Leawood area. Allie was excited to spend her first summer home from college with her family, her friends, and her boyfriend. She was really looking forward to her new job lifeguarding and being a pool attendant. It offered several advantages, including being close to home, the opportunity to work outside, enjoy the weather, work on her tan, and interact with her coworkers, neighbors, and friends. Allie was also responsible for setting everyone's schedule, and that was a plus. Roger Kemp, Allie's father, was also excited to have Allie back at home. Jennifer W., Allie's good friend, said that Allie was her dad's princess, and princess in the most beautiful way, because she was kind, sweet, and adored her parents. Roger had worked hard for many years to build the beautiful life he shared with his family in Kansas. Roger was born in Missouri in 1945, and after high school, he worked for several years as a painter at Ford Motor Company, painting the undercarriages of cars 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. He worked all day in the pit, with cars rolling on top of him, but he was determined to build a better life for himself. Roger enrolled at Central Missouri State University, and after graduation, he moved to the Kansas City area and started a company called Quality Plastic Systems with a friend, which they operated together for 40 years. On January 27, 1979, Roger married Kathy, and together they had 3 children. Allie in 1982, then Tyler in December of 1984, and 2 years later in 1986, another son, Andrew, who went by Drew. Roger worked hard, and because of that, he was able to afford a very nice lifestyle for his family. Their home was at 12,000 Mission Road in Leawood, and to me, it is a mansion. It had 7 bedrooms, 10 bathrooms, white pillars, tall archways in the front of the house, a brick exterior, a garden in the front, and beautiful marble floors throughout. It's just under 11,000 square feet. The ceilings are expansive, the windows in the living room are from the floor to the roof, and there's a balcony overlooking that living room from the 2nd floor. Everything about it is grand. There's an outdoor fireplace on an upstairs outdoor balcony. It's like a castle. There's a full bar, an entertainment area with a foosball table, and a pinball machine. On Zillow, it's described as a remarkable home, and it truly is. The Kemps were very lucky but grateful to live there. Roger loved taking care of his family and being a dad. He was especially active in his kids' athletic pursuits. He coached and managed baseball, basketball, and soccer teams. Roger's friend said that if there was a picture in the dictionary next to the word perseverance, it would be a picture of Roger Kemp. When something didn't go as planned, Kathy always said, "Don't they know they're dealing with Roger Kemp?" Unfortunately, Roger's determination would soon be tested in a way that he never expected. A dad like Allie's should be protected at all costs, and you will know why. Let's jump to the summer when Allie was home from college. It was June 18th, 2002, which began like any other day. Phil, Allie's boyfriend, was working the morning shift. He opened the Foxborough pool, and Allie was set to come in later in the day, relieving Phil and taking over the pool by herself. Around 2 p.m., she was set to work until 5 o'clock, when she would hand over her shift to her brother Tyler. That day, it was unseasonably chilly outside, breezy and overcast, so there wasn't anyone else at the pool when Allie arrived. Phil informed her that, because of the chilly weather, no one had actually been at the pool all day during his shift. After Phil left Allie around 2:15 to start her shift, he went to his second job. Around 2:50, Allie called her best friend who lived nearby and asked her to stop by the pool and hang out to keep her company. A minute later, Allie called Phil to check in about their date planned for that night, but Phil didn't pick up the phone, so she left him a voicemail. Allie's friend arrived at the pool around 3:15. She pulled through the parking lot and right up to the gate where the pool was. Since she knew that no one else would be at the pool except for Allie, she figured Allie would be easy to spot. But she didn't see her anywhere in sight. Being a teenager, Allie's friend didn't feel like making the effort to get out of her car and go looking for her. Instead, she just kept honking the horn, acting really silly and loud to get Allie's attention. But to her surprise, Allie never emerged from inside the gate. Instead, a man peeked out from the pool house, dressed in coveralls and carrying a bucket. He waved at Allie's friend, and she panicked because she thought this man was Allie's boss. She was worried she might have just gotten Allie in trouble for making all that noise outside and coming to her work while she was on duty. So, she quickly drove away. Then, a little before 5 p.m., Allie's brother arrived at the pool to take over the last bit of Allie's shift so she could go home in time to get ready for her date with Phil. He saw Allie's car, a black Jeep Cherokee, parked in the spot near the front gate. But when Allie's brother Tyler arrived and was inside the pool area, his sister was nowhere to be found. Allie's bag, phone, car keys, and all her personal belongings were on a table poolside. Although Tyler searched all around the pool, he couldn't find any trace of her. At first, he didn't think much of it. He assumed maybe she had run across the street to a local store and gotten something to eat. But then he looked at the pool maintenance schedule board, where each attendant has to mark off the tasks they complete on their shift. He noticed that none of Allie's tasks were checked off. That struck him as odd since he knew his sister to be very responsible. It really didn't make sense that, since 2 p.m., Allie wouldn't have gotten anything done. She was supposed to test the water at 2 p.m. and 4 p.m., skim the pool at 2:30 and 4:30, tidy up the restrooms at 3:30, and straighten up the lawn chairs and poolside loungers by 5 o'clock, and none of it was completed. Now this was a cause for concern. He quickly called his mom, Kathy, and let her know that he didn't see Allie at the pool. He asked if she was already at home, but she wasn't. It was in that moment, around 5:20 p.m., that Roger walked through his front door at home to find his wife on the phone with Tyler, at which point Kathy informed Roger that they didn't know where Allie was. Roger didn't waste a second. He jumped back in his car and raced over to the pool, which was only about 1.5 miles away from their home. He arrived around 5:25 p.m., and Tyler was standing at the gate waiting. Once inside the pool area, Roger saw Allie's cell phone, her water bottle, her bag, and books. All of her belongings were neatly placed on the table outside, just like Tyler had described. However, there were no signs of Allie anywhere. Roger glanced around the entire pool area. He even looked in the deep end of the pool because he wondered if somehow she'd had an accident, fallen in the water, and become unconscious at the bottom. But she wasn't there. He even checked the baby pool, which was only a couple feet deep. But again, nothing. He looked everywhere around the pool grounds, searching all the bathrooms in the pool house, but Allie wasn't inside. Finally, he walked into the pump room. The room was dark and cluttered, and it was hard to see. Roger didn't think this was where his daughter would be, but he went inside just to be sure. He looked all around, behind the pumps, and he was about to leave. But then he noticed a blue tarp lying on the floor. Leaning in closer, he saw what looked like a leg sticking out from underneath the tarp. I cannot imagine what flashed through Roger's mind in that moment. What reorientation of his world took place in those short seconds. Up until that point, he'd probably been hoping that there was an innocent reason for Allie's absence, that he would find her in the parking lot with a friend, in the bathroom getting ready for her date, or grabbing equipment in the pump room. But when he ripped the tarp up, all of those hopes vanished. All possibilities of an easy explanation disappeared because he found Allie. But this wasn't the way anyone would want to find their loved one. She was lying face down on the ground, her hair matted with blood. There was blood all over her. He could see she was black and blue all over her body, He could immediately see that she had been beaten very badly. He gently rolled her over, and when he did, he could not believe how brutal it was. He grabbed a hold of her hand and noticed it was cold, and despite the horror and sadness that I'm sure he felt in this moment, Roger jumped into action. He called 911 immediately. I'm going to play a portion of it for you, but first, let me tell you what he said, in case for any reason it's not clear. Roger told the 911 operator, "I think my daughter has been murdered." The operator asked him why he thought that, and he said, "She's not moving, she's laying in the pool house, she's got blood all over her, and she has been red. I can't say the word. But I will play that portion for you now."
Wait with 911, what is your emergency?
I think my daughter's been murdered.
Okay, why do you think that, sir?
Because she's not moving and she's laying in the pool house.
How old is she?
She's 19.
Okay, stay on the phone.
And she's got blood all over. She's
Okay. Stay on the phone. Do not hang up. I'm going to go ahead and get fire and ambulance on the phone also, okay?
I need them here now. Oh, Allie. Oh, Allie. Honey. Allie, stay with us. Stay with us. Are you there? Allie, come back. Allie, come to us. Allie.
Does it appear that she's breathing?
I can't tell.
The operator repeatedly asked Roger to stay on the phone with her and promised that help was on the way. Throughout the call, you can hear Roger begging his daughter to stay alive, to come back, to keep fighting. And I can just picture Roger holding his daughter, pleading for a life that was probably already gone. He wanted to speak to his daughter. He wanted her to tell him who did this to her. He needed to know if there was any consciousness still left inside her. He was holding out hope that she would somehow come to, but she wasn't moving. Roger told the operator he couldn't tell whether she was breathing. Roger explained what it was like to find his daughter, and that was truly heartbreaking.
When I found her and I rolled her over, I couldn't believe how brutal it was.
Police and paramedics arrived within minutes. Homicide detectives Joe Langer, Sergeant Scott Henson, and Chief Deputy Craig Hill of the Leawood Police Department were also sent out. And when they first saw Allie, they were shocked by the apparent violence with which she had been attacked. Chief Deputy Craig Hill said, "I have to say that in my 35 years of experience, it was probably the most horrific thing." And just like Roger, the paramedics said they couldn't believe how brutal her injuries were. There was a pool of blood under the back of her head, her face was swollen, and Allie's shirt and bra had been pulled up around her neck, exposing her chest area. Her shorts and underwear were missing. There was also a ligature mark around her neck. Several of her fingers were broken, and a few of her fingernails had been snapped off. Police said it was clear from Allie's injuries that she put up quite a fight. She had severe blunt force trauma to her head and face. EMTs couldn't find a pulse, but rigor mortis had not set in, so they attempted life-saving measures. A heart machine was also brought in an attempt to resuscitate Allie, but they could not find the necessary heart rhythm to use it. So Allie was rushed to the hospital, where she was joined by her family and her boyfriend Phil. Unfortunately, a couple of hours after she was admitted, a doctor and a nurse came out to speak with Allie's loved ones. The doctor informed them that he had done everything he could, but he couldn't save Allie's life. She was gone. She didn't make it. Losing your daughter at only 19 years old is impossible to fathom, but losing her in this way, seeing her body covered in bruises and injuries that would force you to imagine her terrifying last moments of life, is unimaginable. I don't know how anyone could bear that. But Roger knew he had to stay strong for his little girl. He actually decided to spend the entire night at the morgue with her. He said there was no way he was going to leave her alone. I've never heard of anyone doing this, and it truly shows how much this father adored his daughter. He wanted one last moment with his daughter, who had been taken too soon. Seeing this father's face, knowing the brutality that he had to witness, a lot of times we might forget that we're talking about real people who had to see these things happen to the people they love so much. Back at the scene, investigators began the painstaking task of cataloging evidence. Chief Hill said, "The best way I could describe this pump room is that it looked like a grenade had gone off in the building. You had a jigsaw of evidence in there, and it was going to take every tool you had to go in there and detail it, recover it, and rebuild it. There was stuff everywhere. You could tell how badly Ali was fighting to survive by how much stuff was out of place and thrown all over. There were pool equipment, pool noodles, trash bags, hoses, pumps, barrels of cleaning chemicals, ladders, tarps, and pool rafts. Just lots of stuff to sift through. But they focused on the area where Ali had been lying and then moved outward. Crime scene technicians collected Ali's flip-flops, which were in 2 different parts of the pump room. They took swabs of the blood spatter and the blood pooling. But there was something that stood out. A first aid kit, which was normally kept on one of the shelves, had been dumped onto the floor. One of the items inside was a tube of antibiotic ointment, and it was lying right beside where Ali was found. Its cap was off, and upon closer inspection, it appeared that there was blood on the tube and on the end of the cap. It was almost as though someone opened it to use it, or maybe they just stepped on it in the struggle and the top flew off. They couldn't be sure, but either way, it was swabbed and collected for analysis. Police also collected swabs from Ali's remaining clothing. Meanwhile, almost immediately after Ali's death, the news of her murder began to spread like wildfire through the small community. Local media was all over the story, and soon, every news station was running it. This meant it didn't take long for residents of Leawood to hear the news. They were shocked. They were blindsided. One community member described it as a horrible, horrible nightmare. Of course, Ali's family didn't understand who could have done something like this. What started as a beautiful summer day turned into a nightmare that they could not wake up from. It was terrifying to think that this happened in broad daylight at the local pool in a safe neighborhood. The pure brazenness of this crime really left the locals feeling very afraid. Nothing like this had ever happened there. Friends and neighbors began to gather at the entrance of the Fox Barrow pool to pay their respects, leaving flowers and mementos. One friend said that everyone knew Ali. She was so popular. No one could believe that this happened to her. They also couldn't believe it because she was so cautious. She wouldn't let friends walk to their cars by themselves. She was very aware of her surroundings. She was intelligent when it came to her own safety, and it seemed so unreal that this could have happened. The very next day, Ali's friends and family held a vigil for her, and Roger said that they received so much support, tremendous support from the Kansas City community. Churches, prayer circles, and synagogues, it felt like everyone had adopted Ali as their own. Ali's friends and family also created a website called Ali Forever, in which people could share memories and art in honor of Ali. Friends even wrote poems remembering her and grieving their loss. Roger said that, in the wake of Ali's killing, everything reminded him of his daughter. When he touched a bouquet of flowers, for a moment he thought of his daughter's hair. He said that when the family ate mashed strawberries, all he could think about was how much he loved his daughter and how much she loved mashed strawberries. He remembered how Ali was always curious, asking, "Why this, Dad? Why that?" Roger was now thinking that she was asking about her death, saying, "Why, Dad?" That was what everyone wanted to know, why. On Saturday, June 22nd, 4 days after Ali's murder, her family held her funeral service at the United Methodist Church of the Resurrection in Leawood. Over 1,400 people attended the funeral, many of them wearing lavender and white ribbons in her memory. Ali was buried with her Precious Moments Bible that was given to her by her Grammy and Gramps. When they placed that Bible with Ali's body, it fell open to a picture with a caption. The caption said, "No tears inside the gates." It was from Revelation 21 verse 4. I don't know if it means anything to you, but you can take it as you will, and I'm sure her family did as well. That's why they mentioned it at the service. Ali's parents said, as we said in your high school yearbook, "Having you in our lives has been an absolute thrill. You didn't get the chance to become everything you could be, and that is a huge loss. We always said you were a precious angel from heaven, and now you have gone home. You filled a space in us we didn't know we were missing until we had you. But now we are left with a hole in our hearts. We love you so much, our brown-eyed girl. We'll never forget you. One short year ago, we cried over letting you go to college. Now, as we finally have to let you go, May angels lead you into paradise. We thank God for you and your life." Reverend Alan Hamilton also spoke, and he described Allie as cheerful, naturally smart, radiant, amazing, and unusually loving. He talked about how people flocked to her and reminisced on her trademark snort when she laughed, her teasing of her little brothers, and how she would shout with joy when she was excited. He recounted how, as a child, she had written her grandmother little notes expressing her love for her. She continued the tradition in college, writing her classmates at Kansas State encouraging notes. He ended by saying, "There is a terrible evil thing that has happened. It's left a huge hole in our lives, but evil does not and cannot and should not be the final word. There is goodness in you. Ali showed you that. She lived for you, and that's the word that has to prevail." After the service, Ali was buried at Mount Moriah Cemetery. Ali's tombstone was engraved with a poem that she wrote herself called True Friends. The poem reads, "A true friend listens to what you say. Life's a sculpture. Friends are clay. Friends are notes to life's great song. A melody that carries you along. Whether it's joy or fear, whenever life is hard, they're near. In a world of darkness, friends are light. So thank your lucky stars tonight. When life gets hard and goals seem far, it's then you'll know who your true friends are." How true that really is. So many in Leawood and beyond found a true friend in Ali. But as much as this community mourned Ali's loss, they were clamoring for police to identify her killer. Everyone was desperate for law enforcement to bring this perpetrator to justice, for Ali's sake, and before he could strike again. Law enforcement was also anxious to locate the killer as quickly as possible. Leawood police contacted the Kansas City Metro Squad, who sent some of their elite team to join the Leawood force. In all, there were about 20 detectives working overtime on this case. Next, the investigators were analyzing the results of Ali's autopsy. Dr. Michael Handler, a forensic neuropathologist, performed this autopsy. He's board certified in atomic pathology, neuropathology, and forensic pathology, and he concluded that Ali had suffered both ligature and manual strangulation. But this is the worst part. Ali was not strangled quickly. Because of the petechial hemorrhaging, which is when the capillaries under the skin break and leak blood, creating these tiny red, brown, and purple spots, Dr. Handler believed it had likely taken the killer somewhere between 10 and 16 minutes to strangle Ali to death. There were also periods of time when the killer paused and then started again. Both of Ali's eyes were black and blue, her lip was cut, and I couldn't even count how many wounds she sustained on her head and her face from the report I read and the depiction I observed. Her arms were bruised and scraped. She had bruising on her back, and her hands, especially her fingers and knuckles, were all cut. The fingers of her left hand were contorted and broken. She also had bruises on her face, both of her hip bones, her knees, feet, and her upper thighs. There were also 2 lacerations on the back of Ali's head, which could have been caused by her fall, or someone beating her over the head, or her head hitting the floor. These injuries alone speak to the horrific, gruesome fight. The fact that the killer attacked her so horrifically and then dragged out those last painful minutes is absolutely sickening. One thing that could not be confirmed, though, was whether she had been forced into intercourse, although it seemed, from how she was found unclothed from the neck down, that it was definitely the motive. The time of death was narrowed down to between 2:51 p.m., after Ali made that last call to Phil, and 5 p.m., when her brother Tyler arrived at the pool. After the autopsy and detailing of the crime scene, police turned their attention to those closest to Ali. It is hard to think about, but in murders as brutal as this one, the victim almost always knows their killer. The brutality says this wasn't random, this was personal. Police collected DNA samples from Ali's brothers, her father, and her boyfriend Phil. All of them willingly provided the samples. Roger had told the police that Phil was a sweet guy, a good kid who loved Ali, and that there was no way he was involved. Phil also had a decent alibi. After leaving Foxborough Pool, he had gone to work at another pool, then gone to a friend's house and played video games until he got the call that Ali was rushed to the hospital. His whereabouts were confirmed by those who were seen with him, but they still needed to be sure. By now, The swabs collected from the ointment tube and Ollie's shirt and bra proved to be blood. But it wasn't just Ollie's blood. It was a mixture of hers and a male's DNA. Considering she put up such a fight, they concluded this must be the killer's blood. When they ran the DNA, it allowed them to build a partial male DNA profile. Unfortunately, the sample wasn't clean enough or complete enough to upload to the National DNA Database. But police believed the sample they had could still be enough to match it with the killer's DNA. They just had to track someone down, get their sample, and then compare it. So, they were going to need some suspects. But Roger turned out to be right. It wasn't Phil. When the DNA samples were tested, none of the DNA they collected so far matched the killer's profile. Phil, who was grief-stricken and angry, told the police everything he knew. He said, to his knowledge, Ollie had no enemies. He didn't know anyone who would want to hurt her, let alone kill her. All he knew was that sometimes Ollie got a little creeped out when she was at the pool by herself. The detectives asked him why, and Phil explained that Ollie had mentioned to him that there were some men who had been watching her. They were lawn and garden workers who maintained the pool grounds and the surrounding condominiums. She told Phil that sometimes they stared at her and made her uncomfortable. Even the day she was killed, Ollie didn't want Phil to leave, so he stuck around for a bit before he left for his second lifeguarding job. She wanted him to be there in case the workers were around, but they weren't in sight, so she said it was okay for him to go. The police followed this lead and reached out to the lawn and garden group. Although they didn't find any likely suspects among the employees, these interviews yielded the first big break in this case. The workers told police that the day before Ollie's murder, when they were mowing the lawn, they saw a man lurking around in the bushes outside the pool with a camera or binoculars. They thought he appeared to be looking at the girls sunbathing. Then they said that on the day of Ollie's murder, when they were on break, sitting in their truck in the pool parking lot, they saw a white male driving an early 1980s Ford pickup truck, circling the lot 3 or 4 times before driving away. This was their first big tip. So, police asked anyone who may have seen anything out of the ordinary to come forward. And that's when 3 teenage boys also said they saw something. They saw a man lurking in the bushes the day before the murder. Police then worked with all of their eyewitnesses to put together a sketch of their potential suspect. He was known to be a Caucasian male with a tan complexion, slender, maybe in his 30s or 40s, driving an early 1980s beige or tan Ford pickup truck. The sketch was released on June 22nd, and the tips started to pour in. Everyone wanted to help identify this man, but soon there would be not 1, but 2 police sketches of the possible suspect. And that's because, remember Ollie's friend? She came forward, the one who was supposed to meet her at the pool that day. She drove away thinking she saw Ollie's boss, but now she knew the man she saw was not Ollie's boss. No one could account for who this man was or why he was there that day, so he rose to the top of the suspect list. The standard police procedure for developing a sketch is by using a kit of facial features, either on an overhead projector or a computer screen. But these kinds of tools lack tiny nuances. On top of that, Ollie's friend was traumatized, and because of this, they were not able to put together a sketch that looked enough like the man she thought she saw. So, the police decided to bring in a woman named Lee Hammond, an expert sketch artist. She had retired at the time from freelance sketching, but she volunteered to return to the force to help with this case. Lee met with Roger Kemp, and she said that his passion and determination to find his daughter's killer made her want to help even more. She said the more she got to know Roger, the more his personal strength and character began to come out, and he became the personal spokesperson for every father out there. Sure enough, Lee was able to get a much better sketch from Allie's friend. They spent 3 hours together building the image of this unknown man that she had seen. She knew how important it was for her eyewitness account to be a part of this case. Lee started by asking Ollie's friend to close her eyes and remember that day, to imagine the sights, the sounds, and the smells of the Foxborough pool. When they finished the image, Ollie's friend said that every other composite made him look mean, but to her, he just looked sad. The finished sketch showed a white man in his 30s, somewhere between 5 feet 10 inches and 6 tall, with a heavy build. He had short brown hair and was wearing clothes that might have been overalls or a blue shirt and blue slacks. Immediately, Ali's friends and family jumped into action, doing everything they could to circulate these sketches, both of them which looked entirely different. The one from the lawn care workers and the teens had a more slim facial structure, whereas the one created by Ali's friend had a rounder face. Ali's boyfriend gathered a group of Ali's friends, and they traveled around town and the nearby suburbs, handing out these flyers with the two police sketches. Their plan was to distribute 10,000 flyers. Phil said they were going to go everywhere in the area where somebody could be from. While searching, the friends took a pause to hold hands and say the Lord's Prayer in remembrance of Ali. Lindsay Courtney, one of Ali's friends, remembered that spring break trip to Florida when they had all been talking about things they wished they had done differently. Ali said she had no regrets, that she would do it all again the exact same way, and at least they knew that Ali had lived the life she wanted, even if it was cut short. While Phil and Ali's friends worked to distribute flyers, Roger Kemp was working overtime to get Ali's murder and the manhunt for her killer in the media. He wanted to spread the word as far as he could. You never know who might see the sketches or hear Ali's story and know something, Roger said. I had to keep moving. I had to think about how I could catch this predator. I wasn't going to let him get away. Roger went on the news, talking to the media all the time. He even told the killer, "You will be caught." In another segment, he begged anyone who knew anything to come forward. Please call in those leads. You have a choice. You can stay in bed, pull the covers over your head, or you can get out and try to make something happen. Many of the reporters Roger met with remembered him to this day. One said Roger's face was the portrait of pain, but he just kept going. Amy Anderson, another reporter, said she remembered thinking that Roger Kemp was an amazing father because he was so driven to find who did this to his daughter. He was such a warrior and a champion for Ali, and that is why I told you a father like this should be protected at all costs. He's the definition of what a father should be. Ali loved him so much, and it was evident how much he loved her. He was never going to give up. Roger also offered a reward, hoping that monetary compensation might motivate someone to come forward with information. He raised $24,000, and then an additional $1,000 was contributed by the TIPS hotline. Amazingly, Kansas City provided $25,000 in matching funds from the city's contingency fund, bringing the total reward for any tips that led to an arrest to $50,000. Then, only 6 days after Ali's murder, Roger Kemp went on the show America's Most Wanted. The family was hopeful that this show might lead to a major break in the case because just a couple of years before, back in 1993, the show had broadcast a 40-second segment about another murder of a young woman in Leawood, a Pittsburgh State University student named Stephanie Schmidt. 10 hours later, the murderer, Donald Ray Gideon, came forward, saying that he had seen the clip and wanted to turn himself in. If the show had worked to solve another murder, why not Ali's? The episode aired on August 3rd at 8 p.m. and 10 to 12 million people watched that show each week. After the airing, the tips came flooding in. The show's director said that the calls that came in after this specific episode were the highest number of calls ever to result from a single episode. The police started to sift through all the tips, and Roger kept going. Like I said, he was never going to stop until the killer was found. Ali's friend Jennifer said that Roger's energy was so inspiring and uplifting to her and many of Ali's friends. That's what kept them going and kept them strong. I'm sure it was incredibly hard for Ali's parents. I'm sure it would be for any parent. They had the most wonderful daughter, who was everything they could have ever imagined, and they were just minding their own business in life when something like this happens. Police were also inspired by Roger's efforts and matched his determination. They tracked every lead they could think of. Police Major Craig Hill said that the bottom line was they were going to turn over every single rock, and under one of those rocks, the suspect would be hiding. They were hopeful that it wouldn't take too much more time. Officers were working overtime at this point, getting special approval to work weekends or stay in the office until midnight, or even until 2 a.m. Detectives sent an alert to the National Crime Information Center and the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. Leywood, Detective Ron High, was put in charge of tracking the truck that had been seen at the pool, and he used computer records to search for every 1980 and 1981 Ford pickup registered in Kansas and Missouri. He said there were more than 300 in the metropolitan area alone. He also drove his wife crazy looking for tan pickup trucks wherever they went. He would see one and have to drive around the block to get the license plate number. Police also looked into sex offenders in the area, but none of them seemed to match the description of the man at the pool or could have been Ollie's killer, since they either had alibis or their DNA was not a match. Of course, the biggest chunk of investigators' time was spent running down every lead and tip that came in. When the second sketch came out, it generated over 100 tips in just one day. When America's Most Wanted generated even more, they followed up on each of them, checking to see if any of them led to a viable suspect. They checked up on many sightings of trucks, many sightings of people who supposedly looked like the sketch, but none of them were promising. But Roger Kemp had done his job well, and they had new tips every day to investigate and clear. People were calling in saying, "Oh, my neighbor looks like that sketch," or "My coworker looks like him." There were even people willing to turn over their relatives' clothing for DNA testing, saying that the sketch looked like them. That's progress, but still, there were no matches. Roger was convinced that if they didn't find this guy, he was going to kill someone else, so he didn't want this case to go cold. As a matter of fact, family members of victims aren't usually allowed to know everything that the police do. You've heard and seen this before, but in this case, since Roger was working so hard on his daughter's case, Major Hill pulled him aside and said, "Listen, you're going to be part of this investigation team. We're going to let you be privy to everything that we know." And finally, a tip came in that seemed like it might hold water. Someone called in and said they were suspicious of a guy named James Strater. The tipster said that James looked exactly like the sketch and might have a violent criminal record. Let me tell you, they weren't lying. The detectives really thought the sketch looked exactly like James, or could be his twin, or better yet, the same person, the killer. Other than the eyebrows, I can see it for the most part, but the sketch's brows looked more furrowed. However, we know that the shapes of eyebrows change when a person makes a certain expression. Ollie's friend did say that the man looked sad to her. Plus, James Strater drove an old pickup truck that resembled the one seen at the pool. He worked at a small auto repair shop in Olathe, Kansas, which is about a 20-minute drive from Leawood. Detectives immediately went to James's house, and he cooperated, answering all their questions. He denied having anything to do with Allie's murder. He said he was at work all day that day and told police they could just call his boss to verify. Police contacted James's boss, and he did back up his alibi, saying the two of them were working at the time of Ollie's murder and they were there all day long. He said there was no way James could have left without him knowing. Disappointed, but yet another dead end. Police returned to the drawing board and the ever-growing pile of tips. In the end, they decided not to collect James's DNA because it was expensive to do DNA testing and his alibi was strong. But would someone lie for a killer? It's not unheard of, but they weren't going to take a chance. They applied for a warrant to search his truck, and inside they found a pair of women's underwear and some blood on one of the seats. For investigators, this seemed like a match they were looking for. They knew that Ollie's underwear were missing from the scene, and it had been a bloody crime scene, so no doubt some of that blood could have been transferred to the killer's vehicle. But what really made them think they had found the killer was what was written in a journal found inside that truck. Inside the journal, he wrote that he was the devil's child and that maybe he wouldn't get caught for what he had done. If he did, he was going to take his life. So they definitely confronted him about the underwear and what he said in the book. At first, he said, "Oh, they're my cousin's underwear." Yeah, he said that she left them in there. But then he changed his story and said he didn't know how they got there or whose they were. He became angry about them going through his journal, saying it was personal, and only written because he was depressed and had nothing to do with the murder. Well, for one thing, the underwear were not Ali's, and what appeared to be blood on the seat didn't react chemically to a preliminary test. And of course, there was James's alibi, so they really didn't have anything concrete to hold him on. It was disappointing because they really thought that he was the killer. Now, in July of 2002, the search went national. People began to think that maybe the killer wasn't from the area at all, or that if he was, he had fled to another state. So new flyers were made and news articles created with the headline, "Do you know who killed me?" featuring a picture of Ali, as well as a write-up about who she was and how she was killed. Leawood police sent the sketches and the case information to other police departments around the country. They wanted to see if it was possible that this was a serial case. Did any other departments have cases that resembled this one? They were desperate to know if they could put any pieces together. But while other departments provided leads to the investigation, none of them led to capturing Ali's killer. Roger kept at it too. He said he was struggling, that sometimes he had to fight just to get out of bed, but he had to keep going for Ali. He wouldn't let himself stop until the murderer was found. He kept in frequent contact with the local police. He said, "We're always in touch, at least once a week, and then sometimes many, many times." There were many days where every single day of the week they would have at least 1 or 2 leads that would rise to the top of the pile, and Roger knew what happens to solve rates when cases go cold. He refused to let that happen to Ali's case. But then, in February of 2003, 8 months after Ali's murder, a familiar name resurfaced: James Strater. One of the investigators was actually watching the news when James's mugshot was put on the screen in relation to being wanted for a string of brutal, forceful sexual assaults and kidnappings of young women. I can't say the word here, but I think you know what I mean. The Kansas City Star published the full details of James's series of crimes. He began in Gardner, Kansas, where he forced himself on a 22-year-old ex-girlfriend at knife point, then kidnapped her, driving her to Missouri. He drove to an abandoned mobile home and was trying to break in when a 14-year-old girl walked by. He threw her in his vehicle and took both women to another trailer, where he assaulted both of them. James then threatened the younger girl, saying that he knew where she lived and would kill her if she told anyone what happened. Then he let her go. James drove his ex-girlfriend back to Kansas City but forced her into relations with him once again before finally letting her go. Then he actually did this to a third woman in Hutchinson at knife point after knocking on her door, claiming that he had car trouble. This woman actually escaped. With all these women being attacked in this manner and knowing that someone had done something similar, but even worse to Ali, James was back on the investigators' radar. He fit the profile and looked like the sketch. But when the media found out that a suspect in Ali's murder was now wanted for 3 sexual assaults and kidnappings in Kansas and Missouri, with one of the victims as young as 14, a media frenzy began. The media latched onto the fact that the police never took James Strater's DNA. Plus, like I mentioned before, he had a Ford pickup truck, so everyone was convinced it had to be him. He had to be the killer. However, remember that in 2 of the 3 cases, James let the girls go and he didn't brutally beat any of the women. Ali, however, was murdered so violently. But clearly this guy is a very bad person. So many people thought that someone capable of this violent crime spree would also be capable of killing Ali. Maybe it was that she put up more of a fight and angered him. After all, she was very athletic and everyone thought there were just too many coincidences for it not to be James. So investigators looked more deeply into his background, and things only looked worse. In 1996, in a fit of road rage, he hit a man in the face with a wrench, so he was capable of violence. In that case, he was granted what's known as a diversion, meaning that he was ordered to pay restitution and pursue court-ordered therapy, but he wasn't put in jail. However, when he failed to do what he was ordered, he was put on probation. While on probation in 1998, he was charged with assault, burglary, and aggravated battery after he forced his way into the apartment of the 21-year-old mother of his child and attacked her. James's attorney was able to get the assault charge dropped because he showed that the woman had made similar allegations against a police officer that she had dated. But it looks like she was right though, doesn't it? This is why we should believe women. Just because it's happened to them more than once doesn't mean they're lying. There are more than just one or two men willing to force a woman into having their way with them. This time, James was sent to prison on burglary and aggravated battery charges. He remained incarcerated from July 1998 to August 1st, 2001, just a year before Ali's murder. The problem is no one knew where James was now. So the manhunt was on. 1 week passed, then 2, and finally 3 weeks had gone by with no leads on James's whereabouts. But right when they thought he slipped through their fingertips, they got a lucky break. There was news that he'd moved to Utah. Investigators on Ali's case made sure to forward all of the case information, as well as the warrant for his arrest, to the Utah authorities. Finally, Utah police ran into James when he decided to skip out on paying for gas. The gas station attendant called 911, and the police pulled James over just up the road, at which point he was arrested after they ran his license and saw that he had an arrest warrant. There's actually some dash cam footage of this. So, Leawood detectives were notified, and they thought the search for Ali Kemp's killer might at last be over. The Leawood Police Department flew Detective Langer out to interview James in Utah before he was even brought back to Kansas. When he was first arrested by police in Utah, it appeared he might even be willing to cooperate with law enforcement. He told police, when they pulled him over, "You might as well just cuff me now because I'm wanted." Then, in a Utah courtroom, he didn't speak to a lawyer and accepted his extradition back to Kansas. However, when Kansas police came calling to question him about Ali's murder, his cooperation ended. He continued to adamantly deny any involvement in her killing, even though he did admit that he looked like the guy in the composite sketch. But ultimately, he asked for a lawyer right away and wouldn't speak. Police didn't need James to answer any of their questions. They just needed his DNA. Unfortunately, because of his new string of crimes and his recent arrest, his DNA had been collected, and they felt sure it would be a match for the DNA from the crime scene. Finally, they received the results. It wasn't James Strater's DNA. It didn't match. He couldn't have been Ali's killer, and this was another huge letdown. Everyone had been so sure it was him. While the amount of tips coming in was a good thing, it also meant that this build-up followed by disappointment was a common occurrence for the Kemp family. They were on a roller coaster of emotions for the entire investigation, and this letdown with James wasn't the end they hoped for, just another disappointment. The 1-year anniversary of Ali's death was approaching very fast, and Roger Kemp still refused to give up. He would not rest until he tried everything he could to track down his daughter's killer. Roger then had a new idea of how he could get the word out and not let the case run cold. He took out a half-page ad in USA Today, advertising a rebroadcasting of Ali's episode of America's Most Wanted. Then, Roger organized a rally for Ali, a benefit at the Longhorn Steakhouse in Leawood, where members of the Royals, the Kansas City baseball team, came out and signed autographs to raise money for the search for Ali's killer. The Royals' director of community relations said that it was important that her family knew they weren't alone in their pain, and that they were all grieving with them. On the 1-year anniversary of Ali's death, her friends came together to remember her, holding a candlelight vigil and planning a memorial garden alongside Tomahawk Park, with dozens of petunias and plans for a memorial bench as well. This was when Roger came up with an even more innovative idea, one last-ditch effort to drum up tips: billboards. While driving, Roger realized how many people drive past billboards every day. Thousands and thousands, including people who weren't from the area and might even be from out of state. It was the perfect way to reach people that a flyer and a media campaign might have missed. I don't know if you remember or have been here long enough to have seen my close to 3-hour deep dive into the Rogers family murders. But they also used this idea of putting up a billboard, Roger said. He called the police to run this idea by them, and they said they had never heard of someone using a billboard to find a killer before, but they didn't think it could hurt. Billboards were expensive, though. In the Kansas City area, A 3-billboard package normally cost about $10,000 to $12,000 a month, plus $4,500 just to make the signs. But Roger didn't care. He would spare no expense to find his daughter's killer. However, in the end, he didn't have to break the bank because a local advertising company heard what he wanted to do and gave him the space for these billboards free of charge. Just another example of how the Leawood community rallied behind Roger. Within weeks, there were billboards along US 71, Interstate 70, and Interstate 35 featuring the composite sketch, plus an image of the Ford pickup truck beneath giant red letters reading, "Do you know him?" Then, under that, it said, "Wanted for questioning for murder," and at the bottom it read, 50,000 reward with a number to call. They were impossible to miss, and if you lived in this area, you would drive by at least one of them sooner or later. Roger sat back and waited, praying that his new approach would work, and work it did. The police said they were shocked at how effective this new strategy was. Tips started to pour in again, like they had in the beginning of the case. This was also around the time in May 2003 when the pool where Ali had been killed was finally reopened to local residents. Almost 1 year had passed since it had been designated as a crime scene, from June 18th until they reopened it. When they did, they implemented new security measures, especially considering the killer was still out there. Electronic key cards were needed to enter, and pool employees were now wearing panic alarms that signaled a monitoring company to call 911 in case of an emergency. They also had 2 people on duty at a time. And I wondered about the access from the beginning. This was supposedly a private pool for Foxborough and Hunter Ridge residents only, but it did appear that there were no measures to prevent anyone from just walking right in. But now I want to go back to all the tips. There was one lead that seemed promising, a lookalike of the second sketch, and his name was Ted Hoover. A caller said that Ted not only looked like the sketch, but he also owned a pool servicing company and a Ford pickup truck. So police ran his name, but they found no address or information for a Ted Hoover in the area. They waited, hoping that more information might come in. And sure enough, another caller reached out, saying that they thought the sketch resembled Ted Hoover. But this caller provided an address for Ted in Kansas City. Sergeant Hansen jumped on this immediately. He drove to Ted's house to interview him. Ted answered the door, and at first, he answered Hansen's questions, saying that he knew of the Foxborough pool and that he did own a pool service company. However, when Hansen's questions shifted towards Ali, that's when Ted seemed to clam up. He said he had nothing to do with her murder. He couldn't remember where he was the day she was killed, but he knew he had never been to that pool before, and he refused to provide a DNA sample. He said he wanted to consult with his lawyer first. So immediately, Sergeant Hansen was on high alert. He knew that any time someone refused to give a DNA sample, it made them look suspicious. He wondered, could this be their man? Could the billboards really have led police straight to Ali's killer? Based on what they had so far, though, the police couldn't force Ted to provide DNA. He said that he'd check back with them after consulting with his attorney, but you know what? That never happened. Eventually, they hoped they would find a way to get this man's DNA. That's all they really needed. So a few days later, an investigator called Ted's lawyer to set up an appointment to get his DNA. But his lawyer said that was going to be a problem because Ted had skipped town. The lawyer said he wasn't exactly sure where his client had gone, but he thought it might have been to Florida. Police were now even more suspicious of this Ted Hoover. He matched the sketch, he owned a Ford pickup truck, he worked in pool services, and he didn't seem to have an alibi for the day of Ali's murder. Also, he refused to provide DNA, and now, why would you run? Innocent people don't usually flee. So police knew they had to track Ted down. And once again, the billboards came to the rescue. Another caller contacted the police with information about Ted Hoover. This caller said they thought he might have moved to Connecticut with his girlfriend. Finally, in November 2004, a full year and a half after Ali's murder, police located the girlfriend's address in Branford, Connecticut. They contacted postal workers who delivered to that house, and one postal worker said there wasn't anyone named Ted Hoover receiving mail at that location, but there was a man living there, and he was receiving mail under the name Benjamin Appleby. Police immediately looked up records for Benjamin Appleby, and when law enforcement searched his name, they found a man who looked suspiciously like Ted Hoover. Furthermore, this Appleby guy did have a criminal record, and he'd even served time in prison. So police wanted to go even further into Benjamin Appleby's background, trying to learn as much as they could about him before they made their move. They found out that as a child, Ben's parents divorced, and he moved back and forth between them. His father, Gary Appleby, knew from the time his son was just a kid that there were no doubts. There were a lot of problems with him. Young Ben started stealing beer from the fridge at 10 or 11 years old, according to his parents. And in high school, his behavior only escalated. He started getting drunk every weekend, and in 1992, the summer of his junior year, Ben robbed a donut shop and a convenience store. In one robbery, he pointed a gun at the clerk and pulled the trigger. The gun didn't go off, and later Ben told the therapist that it wasn't even loaded. But nevertheless, that would have been a horrifying experience for the clerk, who didn't know that. Ben explained his action, saying that he hated his life at home and was feeling lousy. It all just worked him up to the point that he committed armed robbery. Then he spiraled even further during his senior year. He stopped doing his work, partied constantly, and said that he had a bad reputation, living up to it. Finally, he ended up dropping out. The robbery was only the beginning for Benjamin Appleby. 6 months later, his crimes took a more sinister and sexual nature when he was arrested for doing inappropriate things in public in front of 2 women in a parking lot. In his court-appointed therapy, Ben's therapist observed that he failed to realize the severity of his sexual misconduct and that he was at high risk of reoffending, potentially posing sexual, verbal, or physical harm to himself or others. This man didn't see the issue with what he was doing. He didn't think it was wrong. And that's a big problem. If someone doesn't think what they're doing is wrong, then what will stop them from continuing? The therapist's report described Ben as a young man who had a history of inappropriate alcohol use, anger problems, frequent legal entanglements, and appeared to be emotionally immature. However, the therapist also noted that he was intelligent and appeared to be fairly motivated for treatment, making positive changes in his life and behavior. However, this would not turn out to be the case because just 8 months after the first indecent exposure incident, the state of Connecticut issued an arrest warrant for a similar incident involving another man, Ted Hoover. It's obvious they're one and the same. I hope that wasn't too confusing. He obviously was going by a new name and committing the same crimes. Kansas police immediately called Connecticut law enforcement, since Ben was now in Connecticut. They needed to work with local authorities to bring him in for questioning and hopefully get his DNA. Connecticut police found 2 warrants for Ben for indecent exposure that were a few years old. They told the Kansas police that they could arrest him on these outstanding charges, and while he was at the station, Kansas police could attempt to question him about his potential involvement in Ali's murder. This sounded like a good plan. Connecticut police also obtained a residential search warrant for the property where Ben had been living with his girlfriend and a warrant for his DNA. Now all they had to do was make their move. On November 8, 2004, Connecticut Detective Daniel Jace arrested Benjamin at the house he was residing at. Other officers remained there to search the home per their warrant while the detective took Ben in for questioning. While they were driving to the station, Ben told the detective that he had been in some trouble in his past, so he'd taken on the name of his deceased childhood friend, Teddy. As soon as Ben arrived at the station, the authorities took that DNA sample per their warrant. He did attempt to refuse the DNA swap, but the authorities informed him he would be compelled to provide the DNA whether he wanted to or not because of the warrant. So, he had to comply. By now, investigators had interviewed over 1,300 potential witnesses and suspects and collected 900 DNA samples for comparison. They were hoping this would be their last one. This news clip that I found shows such a creepy picture of Ben. He just looks evil to me, and maybe that's because he is. Do you think that he resembled the sketch? I did not think he was as much of a match as James Strater, but I do see some similarities. While police waited for the results of the DNA test, Kansas police prepared to question Ben, who was not aware that the Leawood police officers were there at the Connecticut station. They had that element of surprise on their side, and they wanted to seize that opportunity. They wanted to ensure the conditions were optimal to get a confession if this was their guy, because they knew they probably wouldn't get another chance like this. So what they did was prepare a secondary interview room with some props. Yes, they said props, because that's what they did. They created a fake bulletin board on the wall, and on the board they had pictures like an aerial shot of the pool area, an image of Ali, one of Ben himself, Ali's obituary, crime scene photos, an investigation timeline, and all kinds of key pieces of evidence. Then, on the desk where they were going to sit, bent down, were two really thick 3-ring binders with Benjamin Appleby's name on the spine. They wanted to give him the impression that those binders were full of nothing but a bunch of incriminating evidence on him, and it was brilliant. When they arrived at the station, Ben was read his Miranda rights, and then told that there were 2 people who wanted to speak to him regarding an unrelated matter, not related to the indecent exposure warrants. First, the police took him into a regular interview room, not the one with the props in it. He was introduced to the Leawood detectives. As soon as Ben realized that this unrelated matter was the murder of Ali Kemp, he wasn't going to talk. He continued to deny his involvement, saying he was not at that pool, he had never been there, and he had nothing to do with her murder. That's when they said, "Okay, fine, no problem." They started to lead him back out into the hallway, but instead of bringing him back to speak with the Connecticut cops, they moved him right into that staged interview room. As soon as his eyes locked with all the props, everything on the wall, he was just taking it all in. He was really focused on the picture of him in the middle of that link board, linking all the evidence to him and Ali's case. Police then lied. They told him, they're allowed to lie, by the way, I think you know that by now, but they told him that they found Ted Hoover's name on a log of people who were present at the pool that day. He wouldn't stop looking at that board with his picture on it right next to Ali's. Finally, he said, "I lied to you. I was at the pool. I just remembered that." Police knew that they had him, they just had to keep pushing. They needed to get a full confession because he could be about to give a reason why he was there, but still say he wasn't involved. So, they asked him why he had been there that day. Ben explained that he went there because he was hoping to obtain the pool's business as a new client for his pool maintenance company. Sounds reasonable. It sounds like it could actually be true. Now, I have portions of this interview, and I'm going to play some of them for you, because then he went on to say that when he was there, he did see Ali as well. He said he saw her from afar, and he thought she was cute. He wanted to talk to her.
Can you go ahead and tell us what you remember? What happened that day? We went in there with the intentions of looking at the pool to get the business. She was in the pump. She was in the pump room doing something with the pump. And you wanted to have sex with her, right? I wanted to hit on her. You know, she was an attractive young lady.
So that's what he did because he said she was good looking. Since he was actually a pool guy, he easily entered the pool area without seeming suspicious. He was carrying that bucket with him, making it look like perhaps he had been called there to test the pool water. He looked official with his pool company attire on, and Ali wouldn't have suspected anything. When he got there, she was entering the pump room to take care of her attendant duties. As she began working on the pumps, the double doors were propped open by 2 trash cans on either side, so anyone could freely enter that room. And that's exactly what Ben did. Then he began talking to Ali. He said that he hit on her, that it was small talk, and he didn't exactly remember what he said, but that Ali wasn't interested in what he had to say. And of course, that did not go over well with him. Ali couldn't have known that he was a violent predator. He was blocking the doorway so Ali couldn't get out, and that is when Ali became concerned. She attempted to go around him to escape, but that's when he grabbed her.
Ali was in the pump room. No, I just hit on her, man. She was good looking. Small talk. I don't remember exactly what I said. She didn't, wasn't interested in anything I had to say. I tried to hit on her, I touched her. Not hard, nothing. Either on the shoulder or the hip or something.
Okay, so he touched her. He grabbed her shoulder or her hip or her neck. And I think that would scare any woman, all alone and trapped in a room that you couldn't get out of with a complete stranger. Ali pushed him back and she actually punched him. She stood up to this man, this big strong man that stood in the way of her freedom to get out of there. But Ben wasn't going to let her go. He said that he lost it. Actually, I'll just let you hear him tell you.
She pushed me back, and she punched me. I was blocking the doorway, and she rejected me. She pushed me back. I just lost it. I hit her back. I hit her in the face, I think. I don't know how many times I hit her. Took her clothes off with the intention of trying to have sex with her. And what happened? I strangled her, I guess. You said she was strangled. I know I strangled her. I don't know what I strangled her with. And I don't know why I did it. I don't know why I did it. I killed her. And I laid it on. I just laid it on her. I didn't want anybody to find her like that. But I didn't think she was dead.
He said that he hit her again and again, and he kept hitting her. Ben is strong, he's big, and he'd been a wrestler in high school. He'd been in prison. He easily overpowered Ali. He said he didn't know how many times he had hit her, but I think it's clear from the autopsy it was a brutal attack. He said that after she was unconscious, he took off her clothing to attempt to have his way with her. And even more disturbingly, police finally learned the reason that his blood had been found on the antibiotic ointment tube. Because he went to that first aid kit to find something he could use as a lubricant. I'm not kidding. He grabbed for the antibiotic ointment and used it to make his limp noodle stand at attention, but it wasn't working. This is a common problem that we see in these kinds of predators. They have issues in that department, and it's one of the reasons they take out their frustration on women like this. Finally, he said, I don't know why I did it, but I killed her. He was saying this through tears and sobbing. I don't know if it was real or fake, but he admitted that he strangled her. He said, I guess I strangled her, because he explained that he heard that she had been strangled. So he must have strangled her, but he doesn't know what he strangled her with. We know that it must have been something like a rope, a string, something he could tie around her neck while putting pressure on her shoulders and pulling backward while she's lying face down on the floor. Ben then explained that before leaving, he laid the blue tarp over her body. He said, I just laid it on her. I laid it on her. I didn't want anyone to find her like that. I didn't think she was dead. He didn't mean to kill her. This man knew exactly what he was doing. That's clear. He saw what he had done to this poor woman, and he couldn't even bear to look at it. So, he covered her with a tarp to conceal her, not only from others, but because of the shame that killers actually feel when they realize what they've done. Not all killers feel this way, but many of them don't want to look at their victims. It's clear from what Ben said in his confession, and from the injuries that Ali sustained, that despite the utter shock and terror of the moment, Ali fought her absolute hardest to escape. But unfortunately, Ben was enraged at her rejection. He felt entitled to her attention, entitled to her affection and her body. When she said no, he murdered her slowly and brutally. Then, after all of that horrific violence, Ben left the pool carrying his bucket and waving nonchalantly at Ali's friend as he did. He couldn't even keep himself away from the scene for very long after what he had done. He returned later that same day to watch the police investigation in the crime scene. He stood among the friends and family of Ali Kemp as they put up a memorial in her honor outside the pool. He watched the police tape off the scene, and he knew that he had done that. What kind of person is capable of that? Can you imagine standing right next to him in that crowd and not even knowing it? The reason they knew he did this was because he actually got in a car accident nearby. Someone hit his truck, yet no one made the connection at that time that truck matched the description of the one in the parking lot. The police had even gotten his name. He gave it as Ted Hoover, but they also got his phone number. And all that time went by, and they didn't know. Police were shocked and horrified by Ben's confession, but they also felt vindicated. They were glad that they finally had their killer. He was caught. I touched on this, but by the conclusion of this case, more than 1,300 witnesses and potential suspects were questioned locally and in places like Las Vegas, South Carolina, Texas, Atlanta, Colorado, Washington, D.C., Utah, and Connecticut. DNA samples of over 900 people were compared to the ones from the crime scene. The four primary investigators on this case, Sergeant Scott Hansen and detectives Joe Langer, John Dickey, and Ron Hulley, never gave up. But despite all of their work, they were quick to attribute a large part of the success of this investigation to Roger Kemp. Langer said he knows it might even sound corny, but Roger became a friend, and they saw a friend who was hurting. They said that Roger was such a devoted father and that they may never have solved this case without him. He never gave up. But despite this brief moment of triumph, police and Roger knew their work was far from over. They wouldn't be able to relax until they got a conviction. They said, "A lot of our work is just the beginning, and we owe it to the family to get a conviction." Roger added that while there's relief in finding Ali's killer, it doesn't mean it's an end to their grief. People talk about closure, but he didn't see closure. He was still breathing, and Ali wasn't. And he had a problem with that. Roger let it be known that while Ben might have started this fight with Ali, he was going to finish it. Before Ben left that night to be transferred to Kansas jail, he told detectives that he planned to just take a plea deal. He didn't want Ali's family to have to go through a trial because they had been through enough. But you can't trust anything a monster like this says, because within a day of the interrogation, Ben's DNA was matched to the DNA from the crime scene. He was Ali's killer, no doubt about it. But now he wasn't interested in playing nice. I don't think he ever intended to simply give a plea deal. But he pled not guilty. He had all kinds of excuses as to why he allegedly was forced to confess, claiming it was a false confession, that the investigators threatened to hurt him and his family if he didn't confess. Initially, he was charged with first-degree murder, which is punishable in Kansas by a life sentence with 25 or 50 years minimum served before the offender has a chance of parole. However, 2 hours before his first court appearance, his charges were upgraded to first-degree capital murder. This meant that he could now face the death penalty. The charges had been upgraded because Ben's actions demonstrated premeditation. The murder was committed during an attempted commission of his sex crime, and because of the brutality of the crime. But now, the prosecution would have to decide if they wanted to go for the death penalty, or what they call a hard 50, which is a life sentence with 50 years minimum before an offender has a chance at parole. The prosecution had to weigh many factors in making this decision. For one thing, 64% of death penalty convictions are reversed on appeals nationwide. Plus, only one person had been successfully convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death since Kansas had reinstated capital punishment in 1994. And that was a guy named John Robinson Sr., who killed 2 women and concealed their bodies in barrels. There were also 8 aggravating factors to qualify a murder for the death penalty. It has to be force-screen murder, multiple victims, financial gain, a contract killing, the killing of an incarcerated prisoner, resisting a lawful arrest, or the only one that applied in Ali's case, the murder was committed in an especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel manner. Unfortunately, the prosecution in Ali's murder felt that they fell a little short of the standard for especially heinous, because usually it had to involve either torture or mutilation. So in considering all these factors, they chose not to seek the death penalty. Instead, they were going to try to incarcerate him for the rest of his natural life. Well, this didn't go over very well with Roger, who thought his daughter's slaying was certainly atrocious enough to warrant the death penalty. But of course, we know this is the law. These are statutes. It's not about how we feel, but it's about the definition of the crime. Roger studied the law and felt like the legal system gave way too much protection to murderers. He also felt that he had really let Ali down. No matter your opinion on the death penalty, I can certainly empathize with Roger's anger and frustration. Ali was beaten again and again, then slowly strangled, and the state was telling him that her death wasn't heinous or cruel enough. When Ben appeared in court for his first hearing, he was wearing a tear-away self-harm prevention vest, and he used a copy of his charges to shield his face from the media. The trial was set for November of 2005, and when it came time for that trial, his attorney began by stating that this wasn't a case of who done it. They weren't asking to let him go home after this, but they did want the right justice. The case would focus on pushing for the jury to find Ben guilty of a lesser crime than capital murder, thus reducing the time he spent in prison. In order to get Ben this lesser sentence, the defense, who was a woman by the way, I just want to point that out, because sometimes that's a strategic move when a man is charged with killing a woman to show, look, a woman is willing to represent him, focused on Ben's mental state at the time of the crime. She also wanted to focus on Ali's condition when paramedics arrived at the scene and the police's alleged coercion of Ben's confession. She made the argument that he was under the influence of extreme mental and emotional disturbance at the time of the murder, and thus his capacity to conform his conduct to the requirements of the law was substantially impaired. I personally think this is a huge stretch. I get what she's trying to convey, that Ben snapped and wasn't in control of his actions for a brief period while he committed the murder. But come on, who wouldn't feel mentally and emotionally disturbed while they're killing someone? She also implied that Ali might not have been dead when he left her, emphasizing the fact that firefighters had performed life-saving measures on Ali when they arrived and that rigor mortis hadn't set in. This also felt like a flimsy argument. Even if Ali wasn't dead when he left her there, there's no contesting the fact that she died soon after, and it was a direct result of Ben's actions. Finally, his defense attorney tried to make the case that since Kansas City had colluded with the Connecticut police, they acted outside their jurisdiction, and that the confession they got wouldn't be allowed. The judge, however, ruled that the confession was in fact admissible, and that was a win for the prosecution. The prosecution focused their case on the extreme violence with which this murder was committed, the premeditation involved, and Ben's history of violence and sex crimes. They also countered the defense's claims that Ali had not been dead when paramedics found her, explaining that it was common for firefighters to perform life-saving measures just in case, even when a person appears to be dead. They noted that the EKG machine hadn't even been able to find the necessary heart rhythm required to be used. They had to explain what premeditation was to the jury. While the defense claimed that Ben had not intended to kill Ali when he arrived at the pool that day, the prosecution explained he didn't have to have a plan that far in advance for this murder to be premeditated. They instructed the jury that, by Kansas law, premeditation doesn't have to be present before a fight, quarrel, or struggle begins. There's no specific time period required for premeditation, but it does require more than an instantaneous, intentional act of taking someone's life. Premeditation can occur at any time during a violent episode that ultimately causes someone's death. Plus, it was planned. His truck was seen there on other occasions, and you could have seen the pool maintenance schedule hanging on the wall outside the pump room. It's large, it's in plain sight, and it would have made sense to a person like him who worked on pools to know the times when certain tasks needed to be carried out by pool attendants, including Ali. We know she was alive at 2:50 when she texted her friend and called her boyfriend. She was already attacked by 5 o'clock when Tyler came to relieve her from her shift. According to the pool maintenance schedule that was on that wall, at 4 p.m., Ali would have gone to test the pool water. She would have gone into that pump room for chemicals, and Ben was waiting for that specific moment when he could corner her. These details, coupled with the autopsy report that said it likely took Ben 15 minutes to strangle Ali, clearly established premeditation. 15 minutes was not instant. There were many moments in which he could have stopped what he was doing, but instead, he chose to keep going. In the end, the prosecution called 13 witnesses to testify on Ali's behalf, including her father, her boyfriend, and her brother. They also played the 5-minute-long emotional recording of Roger Kemp's 911 call. People on both sides of the courtroom were in tears. It was no surprise that on December 5, 2005, after only 2.5 hours of deliberation, The jury found Benjamin Appleby guilty of capital murder and attempted forcible intercourse. When the jury announced their decision, Roger said, "It seems like that day had been 3 days long," and everyone swarmed to hug him and the rest of the Kemp family. Ollie's boyfriend shook each one of the detectives' hands. Finally, they had done it. Ben was guilty. Now, all that was left was the sentencing. And like a coward that he was, Ben did not attend the sentencing hearing on December 26th to face the Kemp family and their impact statements. The Johnson County District Attorney, Phil Morrison, said that jailers had trouble getting Ben out of a cell that morning. Why? Because Ben said he didn't want to hear all the lies and misrepresentations about his criminal past. Poor Ben, he doesn't want to face the truth. It wasn't lies. It's the truth about what this monster really did and who he really is. Morrison went on to say that cowards shrink responsibility, and that's what he was trying to do. Ollie's mom, Kathy, who had stayed away from most of this trial and wasn't in the public as much as her husband, did make an appearance for the sentencing along with Roger. More than 50 others filled the courtroom, all wearing white and lavender ribbons for Ollie. The prosecution reiterated their case from trial, and the defense brought 2 people forward to testify on Ben's behalf: his sister and a clinical psychologist. His sister, in an extremely quiet voice, told the courtroom that Benjamin would always be her big brother, and his psychologist said that he was suffering from intermittent explosive disorder. We've heard about this in other cases. It's characterized by an outpouring of rage, sometimes out of proportion to what might have happened. They wanted to offer this as a potential mitigating factor. In the end, however, Ben's witnesses made zero impact on the judge, who assigned him the maximum sentence of 50 years and 228 months for the attempted forced sexual conduct. This was an absolute victory for the Kemp family. It was the highest possible sentence he could have received other than death. But in the end, Ollie's mother, Kathy, said, "It's never going to be over. I'm never going to get Ollie back. I'm not going to be able to help her pick out a wedding dress. I'm not going to be a grandmother. It will go on until I die. She was the love of my life. I'm so sorry to this family, and it is truly sad that her only daughter was dead and never coming back." Sentencing should have been the end of all these horrible trials for this family, who had already suffered so much. After almost 5 years of fighting, they should have been able to start the new year attempting to find some peace and start to rebuild their lives. But even after the trial, Ben would not let his conviction rest. Like many other criminals, he appealed his sentence, not once, not twice, but 5 separate times. 5. Yeah, you've got to have something really wrong with you if you confess, your DNA is at the scene, and you're still trying to get out of murdering someone. He appealed in November 2009, then again in October 2010, in February 2015, in August 2019, and most recently, just a few years ago, in April 2021. And Roger fought Ben on every one of his appeals. He said, "I never ever wanted to say his name. I never said it but once, and then I swear I would never say his name again. But I'm going to say it a lot now. Benjamin Appleby is a murderer. He deserves to be in jail for 50 years. Roger collected information on Ben's past behavior to show that not only did he harm Ollie, but that he had a history of dangerous behavior, which would likely reoccur if he was released. Some of this evidence came from a book, All I Was Here, by Jim Davis, in which Ben's years of violent sex crimes preceding Ollie's murder were detailed. Roger Kemp shared an email, a P.O. box, and even a Facebook page for anyone who wanted to submit information to help bolster his case against Ben. Anyone who wanted to talk about his past, his violent tendencies, or their experiences with him. Roger said that Ben is someone who goes against our society, who goes against our laws, and who doesn't care about the law until he's caught. Then he wants every right under the book that he's so willing to take away from someone else. He silenced Ollie's voice. She has no voice in this. She can't speak, so he was speaking for her. And shockingly, one of his appeals actually did go through. They overturned his attempted forcible intercourse conviction, the one that added the 228 consecutive months. That was removed. The court ruled that it was kind of double-dipping because he'd already been given 2 sentences for the same crime. His attempt was part of that 50-year sentence. But that wasn't good enough for Ben. He wanted to try for more freedom. In the following decade, he appealed on several other grounds, all of which were unsuccessful. Thank goodness, he's still incarcerated in the Hutton State Prison, where he will not be eligible for parole until 2054. And although Ben's many appeals have been traumatizing for the Kemp family, who have had to be forced to wonder again and again whether Ali's killer might be set free, they have not allowed this to distract them from their mission. After Ali's death, Ali's friends and family said they always knew Ali would make a difference in her life, although they didn't expect her to make a difference after death. They hoped she would be proud of the way her name, her story, and her family are changing the lives of tens of thousands of women. Roger Kemp worked to form the Ali Kemp Educational Foundation, which forms the acronym TAKE, T-A-K-E. They called it Take Defense. TAKE provides educational scholarships to young women and hosts 2-hour-long self-defense classes. Their website states that women have the right to feel safe wherever they go, and their classes, offered around the country, often on college campuses, aim to make that goal a reality. They offer classes and tips on how to avoid a variety of dangerous situations, how to verbally and psychologically respond in case of an attack, and ultimately how to engage if you do enter into a physical attack. They teach women how to strike an attacker's eyes, nose, throat, and groin long enough to break away. Knowing these moves can help. If you've never practiced anything like this, you usually just freeze up, but when you know the moves, you can easily do them and possibly get away. I don't know if Ali could have done anything to prevent this monster from harming her, unless maybe she was armed with a gun, and that wouldn't have seemed very reasonable or even been allowed. Wearing a bathing suit or shorts, or just attending a local pool, thinking that this 19-year-old would have had to carry a firearm just to be safe? I think the best way would have been to avoid this altogether. Proactively protect women by never having them work alone. Killers are less likely to initiate an attack on a woman if they're with someone else. They don't want to deal with someone fighting them or running to get help, so they purposely target unsuspecting females who are by themselves and more vulnerable. Ben saw Ali alone. He waited for his chance to attack her. Had there been just one other person at the pool that day, either working or just swimming, this could have been different. Roger was even honored by former President Obama at the time and awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal, the second highest civilian award given by the president, for Roger's work with the Take Foundation. Tragically, Roger passed away unexpectedly on March 1, 2022. He left behind his wife of 43 years, Kathy Kemp, his 2 sons, Tyler and Drew, and a brand new granddaughter who was only 16 months old at the time. She was named Alexandra after Ali. He was remembered in a memorial service on Friday, March 11th, at the United Methodist Church of the Resurrection. His family said, quote, "We know our darling Ali was waiting on March 1st when the gates of paradise opened for her father. Though Ali couldn't come back to her dad, eventually he went to her, knowing he had done everything he could do for his daughter on this earth before joining her in heaven." End quote.